Welcome, everyone. Regular meeting of council Tuesday, December 10th. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inca, Kappa, and Silk people. Late items, we have none. Public input, I highly doubt it. Adoption of minutes, 4.1. Regular council meeting minutes, November 26, 2024. Recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on November 26, 2024 be adopted. Councillor Hogan, Councillor Baxter, any errors or omissions? Yeah. That's true. So all those in favor of the revised regular council meetings held on November 26th? Same people? Good. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Come on, have a seat. General matters, delegations and recognitions, none. Unfinished business, none. Bylaws, none. 7.1 City of Merritt fees and charges bylaw number 23862024. I'll read the first one and then we'll take off from there. How's that? Recommendation that council read City of Merritt fees and charges bylaw number 23862024 for a first time. Councillor Petrosi, Councillor Hogan. Questions? CEO.
So, Mr. Mayor, would it be of benefit to council for us to go section by section to give people an understanding of what they can expect to see in this year's fees and charges bylaw?
I think that would probably be best. That way council can then jump in when they have a question.
Perfect.
Sure, let's do that.
Yeah.
CAO, it's over to you.
Go ahead, CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, push your button, please. So Councillor Egan.
Thank you. Is this the revised with the red line?
What I was just going to say is the copy that's been circulated on table is a revised version of the bylaw that's in your package. There is one error that had been identified, and that was under the metered rates for residential. The 2025 rates have been adjusted. So that is what you are considering this evening, is the revised version that was circulated on table prior to the beginning of the meeting. This is not a red line version. There is a red line version in the package.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
So I'd just like to give a little bit of background about the fees and charges that the city uses to generate revenue. So municipal governments have three streams of revenue, and these cover both our operational and our capital costs. So these are property taxation, user fees, and government transfers, which we get because of the size of our community, we get a small community grant from the provincial government for about $500,000. And the rest of our sort of government transfers comes from grant programs that we have to apply for. We also get gas tax, or what is the community building fund now, but was previously called gas tax. We get about between 3.5 and 380, something like that. $380,000 a year. Gas tax goes to capital projects. So you can see we have a multi-million-dollar budget between operations and capital that's, annually between around $25 million to $30 million. And outside of taxation and user fees, the only guaranteed funding we have from other levels of government is less than $900,000. Every other piece of funding that we get from provincial and federal government, we have to apply for, and it's a competitive process against every other municipality, either in the province or across the country. So that's why we have property taxation and user fees, because there is no other way to pay for the services that we do. So when you think about snow plowing in the winter, that is paid for by the residents. If you think about the use of our recreation facilities, there is a combination between user fees, and taxation to offset those costs, right? Because if we went straight to user fees for our recreation facilities, we would have to, I'm not even sure, like 10 times the cost of user fees. So if you're an adult and you're paying $5 to go to the pool, it would cost you $50 to go to the pool to offset if we didn't use tax revenue. Same thing with water and sewer. We have different ways of paying for water and sewer. The primary way to pay for operations is through user fees. The primary way for pay to capital is through parcel tax. That's how we generate revenue. So when we're talking about, it's so expensive. Yeah, it is expensive. It's expensive for a municipality to function. And we apply on any grant that has even the remotest like suggestion that one of our projects or programs might fall within it. Sometimes we go out on a limb and it doesn't quite work out for us, but we spend, I think the grant report that you had a couple of weeks ago showed there are dozens of grants that we either get or we apply on or we're planning to apply on to offset the cost to residents. So in 2024, we provided council with a consolidation of our fees and charges across all of our program areas. And one of those reasons is because every time we update fees and charges, it would require updating every single bylaw. So we've pulled them all into one bylaw, and we're still missing a few because we're working through some bylaw changes in a bigger frame with some of the bylaws, and those fees and charges will come into this bylaw probably either this year or as an amendment or in 2026. But ultimately, we want to be able to give people a sense of what the next 3 years looks like in regards to their user fees. And the city clearly, we're not a business. We're not trying to make money. We're trying to operate and put some money in the bank for future projects like, critical infrastructure or upgrades to our public facilities. But there's no profit to be made, right? So unlike a business, we're not asking people to pay for something so the city can make a profit. We're just trying to function as a city. So that's why we have fees and charges. And it's not because the city just wants to charge people more money. It's because this is how we function. This is how our budget works. Without this, we don't have the money to run all the services. So that's when you would see, less garbage collection, less snow removal, fewer responses by ambulance or by fire departments. Like we would have to cut a lot of services. So we wanted to bring this bylaw, continue to bring this bylaw to you year over year because we want people to see where we're going over the long term to try and catch up on the long standing lack of updating of the fees and charges and the idea that we have to keep up with our inflationary pressures as we move forward. So in this bylaw, the 2025 rates and fees are what you're approving. The 26 and 27 are just projections. They're not set in stone. That's why you see it every year instead of every 3 years. So you're approving just this year, 2025, the coming year. In 2024, we had some pretty significant increases across a lot of our program areas. Again, there was a lot of programs that hadn't had increases in 10 or 15 years. And so obviously they weren't keeping up with inflationary pressures. And if you think about, just the cost of electricity or the cost of staff dollars or supplies for a program, the cost of making ice goes up every year. That results in us not being able to recover the fees and either having to rely on our reserve funds to manage our operations, which is not what we want to do, right? Reserves are our savings so that we can do the big projects that need to be done to keep the community sustainable. But when we rely on reserves or when we unnecessarily put ourselves at risk, it makes it harder for the community to be sustainable and it makes it harder to attract people, right? Nobody wants to come to a community that might not be stable and that might have a mass exodus because all of our recreation infrastructure is shut down because we haven't updated it. So we're trying, trying to give people some advance notice. We did see a lot of increases last year. And to make sure that we're not using our reserves to pay for operational costs. And in a lot of places, you will see that we're continuing to just do that 5% increase year over year, just to keep up with inflationary pressures. However, in the briefing note, and which will guide you through the bylaw update, there are some areas where we have recommended, and these are just recommendations, it's council's decision, and we will justify our recommendations. So any ideas around how you'd like to do it differently are certainly welcome feedback for us. But we'll start with water and sewer because that's the first schedules in the bylaw. So water and sewer funds are separate than our general operating funds. They have their own separate account system. And ultimately with water and sewer, municipalities can't make money on water and sewer services, right? They're a critical core infrastructure. There's, people have the right to access water and sewer in some way, whether that be, by trucked services or by piped services. Our responsibility is to provide some way for people to access water and sewer. But what we need to do with water and sewer is break even. And when I say break even, it means that we're only using user fees to generate the revenue that we need to operate and to plan for capital replacements for water and sewer infrastructure. So, we're talking about the amount that is break even is staff wages. It's training, mandatory training for staff, because wastewater and clean water processes require staff to have pretty intensive training. There are multiple levels, there's work hours, there's courses, like it's a very intensive program. It also covers the chemicals that we put into any of our processes to deal with the water and wastewater, clean water and wastewater. It inclusive of, the gas in the truck to go check the pump stations, all of those things. And it also includes a plan for repairing or replacing infrastructure into the future. So it's a big bill. We want to try using user fees to break even instead of taking money from general taxation. Which makes a lot more sense. And I think Councillor Charney said something the other day about Peter paying Paul, robbing Peter pay Paul. The idea is that when you are burdening people, sorry, you turn that down, boy. When you are burdening people for the cost of water and sewer, when we have water meters, then we burden people proportional to what they use. Right now, because we don't have water meters other than in our commercial, institutional, and industrial facilities, residents are paying a base rate that everybody pays. It doesn't matter how much water you use. When you've got water meters, you can say, if I use this much water, this is my burden to the city. If Councillor Petrosi uses more water than me, his burden to the city should be higher. And right now, what we're doing is essentially similar to a taxation, in that everybody's paying their same burden, even though they're using this service differently, right? If I have a household of 8 people and a household of 2 people, the chances are those 2 people are using less water unless they've got a big swimming pool and they have beautiful lush green lawns and they have a fountain and, those sorts of things. But our expectation is that they use water differently. And so the use of the water meters helps us to burden each individual household or each individual property proportional to what they use and how much burden they put into the system. But right now we don't have that. So we just have a general rate that every residential property pays. And those other properties that are metered, as I mentioned, will pay based on usage. So in 2024, we recommended a 25% increase in user fees. because we were still relying on general tax revenue to support our operation, and we were not generating any reserves whatsoever through user fees. We were through parcel tax, but that's a different process. It's really the sewer fund that's experiencing the widest gap between revenue and operational costs. So you'll see the trying to close the gap mostly on that side. And so we want to get that gap closed, because if we're relying on general taxation to run our water and sewer, it also removes the opportunity for us to take any surplus from general taxation and put it into reserve. So we're constantly shorting ourselves on reserve building when we're not charging properly for something like water and sewer. And it leaves us in a position where we have to do everything we can to build the reserve to deal with the wastewater treatment plant, and put, all of the parcel tax and everything is going into that on the sewer side. But that means then we're stuck relying on gas tax to do other projects. And with gas tax, there's a range of projects we can do with gas tax. And some of those will have additional funding streams and some of them won't. Some of them, gas tax and our unrestricted reserves are the only thing we can use to do that project. So with water and sewer, there are often funding sources. But if we don't have the matching amounts and reserves, then we can apply on those funding sources. It becomes this very convoluted, unsustainable system. And it means other things don't happen. So the 25% user fees was approved with a recommendation of an ongoing increase of 5% year over year. Now, I was just in the seat in 2024 when budget processes start. Kevin hadn't been here very long either. So we this year decided we were going to do a little bit of an inquiry on the costs, the operational costs, and what the gap looks like for water and sewer, both on the operational side and in generating reserves. And we know that on the operational side, we're about $700,000 under generating for revenue. So that doesn't even take into any capital. So with the annual capital sort of contribution we should be seeing, we're like a 1.1 million under generating revenue. So that's a fairly large amount. And so with this year's bylaw, what we're proposing, and thanks to the committee for coming up with a strategy on this, is that over the next 2 years, we have to try and close those gaps. And so the rates over the next 2 years show, again, a higher increase than the 5%. But again, we should be closing that gap and should be able to go back to that 5% year over year inflationary increase going forward. We've also taken the single family residential suites and apartments, and we've formalized the difference between them. So a single family residential, if that's the base rate, a single family residential with a suite, we're identifying that's about a 75% higher usage of water. So the burden is an additional 75%. For an apartment, because they're probably not doing grass, we're saying that they're a 25% less than the base of a single family dwelling. So everything's sort of based on that single family dwelling. You're either 75% over or you're 25% under on your consumption. And again, because we don't know, like an apartment could have 2 or 3 rooms and a single family residential could have 2 or 3 rooms. Same size family could live in both. Same number of residents, same amount of water usage, other than perhaps not watering the grass.
Councilor Rogan.
Thank you. So where are you basing these 75% assumptions? Are we talking about guesses? Because we don't have water meters right now. We will know until these water meters are installed so that we will know the usage of one house versus one house with a suite, correct?
Yeah. And so we are taking some best guesses on, again, if you have a suite with 2 or 3 people living in it and you have a house with 4 people living in it, we know that it's not 100% increase, but there's some level of increase. And so trying to just find the proper burden for each of those types of residences we're just at this point, because we don't have the evidence based that we would get from water meters, we're basing it on okay, we know it's less than 100%, but where does it sit? So we're recommending 75% at this time because it's our best assumption.
Councillor Etcher?
Um, I'm concerned with Counselor Ogan on the comment about the suite, because right now, because we're taking guesses, it just seems like a high increase in 1 year. And that's my concern. Because 75% over the single family, because sometimes people have just built a small suite and it's just to accommodate one person. I understand, we don't know, and so just arbitrarily putting the 75%, I think a lot of people are gonna be upset with it, so.
So again, if council has an alternative, right, because if you remove that, or you change and lessen that percentage, then the other units, the single family dwellings will have to go up. Right, because they'll have to carry the rest of the burden.
Oh, Councillor Sharney, sorry.
Have you looked at other communities and looking at the water consumption on a single residence and then one with a suite, and to see the percentage increase of water with a single suite to get an idea?
We wouldn't have those numbers, like that's their billing system. We know what they charge per liter, we know what their base rates are, but we wouldn't know their consumption ratios.
So we have no data, we're just.
It's really not
Okay.
something we would have data on.
So I've been making some phone calls with some people I know, and almost everybody I've talked to, they're on water meters. So that's how they're gauging it. We're not on water meters.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. when
There's
we're
not a lot of communities that are in the same situation that we're in. Councillor Ogan?
No, and I agree that it's not fair when we are not recovering cost for the service that at 100%. So I just feel that specifically for this item, we will have to wait until the water meters are installed. So we have to talk about what can be done right now with what we have, with the information that we have, so that we can meet that expectation to cover any costs associated to these services. So I just feel like that approach or recommendation, it's not the right time at this point.
Councillor Baxter?
Would this, if we do this increase, would it spur more people to put water meters in if they do have secondary suites?
They're going to have to put water meters in. There won't be a choice. Under our water works bylaw, they will have to put water meters in. That's the project. And it's not them putting the water meters in. The funding is for us to put water meters in. And they will have to identify that they have a secondary suite, right? Because you can't have two sets of garbage cans unless you have a suite. So this is a place where people who are not aligned with licensed, like suites that meet the building code, will have to start thinking about how they're going to upgrade those. And we've got several projects that we're working on to try and support that financially. But people are going to have to legalize their suites, and it will be very obvious to us when somebody has a suite in what is identified through assessments to be a 3-bedroom home, and they have like a suite in the basement with 3 other people living in it. We'll see huge increases in water consumption for that residence compared to other residences that don't have suites.
Councillor Petrosi?
I'm not sure who would know when houses actually had water meters installed. There was a certain year that they started being installed, and then a certain year that you didn't have to have them. Is there a 1993 to you had to have a water meter installed, and then after that
On new builds.
But we didn't read
Right.
it. We didn't read them.
right?
The owner-
But
the owner
they're
would read it.
existing in the homes right now.
So the RFP that has been awarded is for the vendor to go out and look at each home to determine what has water meters. If there's any part of that, if that water meter is still functional, if it will be readable by the new system, which will just be like, boop, it reads them all. And if not, then what parts of it need to be replaced? So that's the RFPs, and every home will have an inspection of their water meter, or will determine if they don't have a water meter. So we will know in the next 6 months, probably sometime in the summer, about how much we're gonna be replacing water meters.
So
or
that's kind of the
installing.
target date is.
We're hoping to
summertime,
have a
by
good chunk,
summertime.
as the director said yesterday during budget, to have about 75% of the project done by the end of 2025.
Thank you.
Okay, so we seem to have a sticking point here on the suite situation. So where do we want to go with this? I'm hearing not happy. I'm hearing not enough information. What do we want to do with this one? Councillor Hogan.
Thank you. So I just want to go back a little bit of the information that it's provided to council. When this information is provided, we try to do the best, make the best decisions. Back in 2022, I questioned about why we have not increased these services. And the information that was provided to us, it was like, do not worry, councillor. We are very good in this area. We have reserves and a lot of information on that aspect. Now we have, you guys identified the problem that we are not even collecting enough money to cover the cost. Thank you for that. So I just feel like the 25% increase that happened already, it was a big change for the residents. So if we cannot do that, we cannot close that gap in 2 years. I feel like it is not recommended. So it's possible. I would not recommend that one. So we have to extend that into at least 4 or 5 years so that the impact in the residents is going to be less. At some point, we have to get enough money to cover all the costs associated to those services. So I just feel like the 75% increase is not feasible because it's not based on any data. So we have already approved the installation of water meters, and when that happens, we have to review that. But right now, I would like to stick to the 5% that we have, agreed last year.
If I can,
Yes, CEO.
So again, when I presented this to the committee last week, I just showed them what it would look like if we did all of the necessary increases in 1 year to close the gap. And they made the decision, which I think was the right decision, to extend it at least 2 years. I think, suites are going to have a higher burden. They should be carrying a higher burden if you have a household that has a suite, right? You've got 2 kitchens, potentially 2 laundries, things are a lot different. Whether it's 75% or you choose a different number, there is some form of burden. And, but I don't think it's unreasonable for council to say, okay, let's do this over 3 years, because in 2026, we won't have a full year of data around the water consumption based from the water meters to have the whole city on meters. We don't think, right? So that means our first full year of data collection is 2027. Where we have each season, we have all of the data for a year in 2027. So when we come to 2027 and we start to say, okay, these are the actual costs, and this is that, again, we know we are losing this much water, we know we're kind of where it is. Now we have to budget to fix those things. There are going to be additional costs, but I think it's not unreasonable for council to say, okay, we're going to do this over 3 years. Maybe keep the burden ratio similar to what I'm suggesting and do it over 3 years. So it's less impactful for individual residents year over year. But
Sorry.
I think you do have to start making a change to try and collect as much as you can to cover the service.
Councillor Richard.
I don't disagree with needing to increase things for covering the service. And in previous years, we had been told that it was a healthy reserve in some of our reserves, not necessarily sewer, but maybe the way it was displayed wasn't as detailed as what we have now, thanks to Kevin with his hard work. So I think the 75 would be excessive, but if we did do it 3 and went with 25, I think that would be something more reasonable to have an increase that's more than the 5, but not the 75. And I just think that because we're increasing the basic tax rate, and I know that's not maybe where we need to be this year, it's just the impact if you add up the garbage, the sewer, the water. I'm just worried what people are going to be paying in their utilities semi-annually.
Yeah, and
and that's why I would want to go 20.
This is the biggest increase area that impacts residents in the whole bylaw. So this is the crunchiest, as Kevin likes to say, this is the crunchy part, right? So if council's amenable as to us bringing this back as for, as a 3-year increase, but I think that's a direction you have to give me so that we can.
Councillor Charney.
Before Councillor Etchert spoke up, I was agreeing with what you were saying, that we do know that a house with a suite does use more water. So they should be paying for more water. How much, we don't know until we get water meters. So they should be taxed more, but the 75% is a big amount. So if we did go over the 3 years of 25, I would be very agreeable to that. And then that'll get us into the water metering, and then we know exactly what we're dealing with instead of assumptions.
Council, well, since beating a horse to death, how do we feel about this?
So similarly, some changes to sewer, and we don't meter sewer out, but that what goes out, right? We only meter what goes in. So the typical way to do it is 80% of your water consumption is what you pay for sewer. So that is what we're setting these rates on. And again, it is an increase. We are trying to close the gap specifically on sewer. So if council again wants to go a 3-year versus a 2-year, we can certainly change those numbers up. But
Council?
again, this is the other big, this is water and sewer, the two big ones.
Councillor Charney.
I didn't understand that 2 years. I thought it would, what are we changing in the sewer there?
So all the rates are changed in the sewer
80%.
to 80% of your, so we're significantly increasing sewer to try and close the gap
Mhm.
on all residents. Right now it's at 2 years. So if council wanted to extend it to the 3rd year to spread it out again a bit more, to close that gap, and then also get us to that end of 2027 where we feel like we'll have decent data to really start the discussion, might be worthwhile.
I would say let's stay consistent. If we're going to do the water, we might as well do the sewer. That way we're not, it's fairly easy numbers. I mean, fairly easy situation. We're not surprised. Yeah, so I think that's where we'll stay. Okay, are we done with sewer and water?
Yeah.
Okay, what? Councillor Charney.
Okay, as stated in the policy review, charging residents for when they have their water turned off. When you're charging for an unused resource, it's both unfair and unrealistic. No service is being provided to that house. So it's unrealistic to charge for a resource that is not utilized. I understand what we were told, that that house is not contributing to the operation or capital costs, but they are not using any services. Fortis BC, if you don't use it, you pay a small amount for a delivery, but you do not pay for the service of gas delivery. So I don't see why, when a house has their water turned off, that they are going to be charged full amount of water, the same as a house that is using the water. If you're not using the service, you should not be charged for the service.
So Councillor Charney, the only problem is without a water meter on, it doesn't matter if your water's turned off. If you go to Palm Springs for 4 months, you're still going to pay the same amount. You can turn your water off, but you're still going to pay the same amount.
If you're on a water meter, there is no consumption of the water,
But
so you will not.
So
You
how,
will be charged. So the way it works is that because the infrastructure costs us money, every household has to contribute. So if we have to replace water meters, which don't have a forever life, their life expectancy is 10 to 15 years. Every single pipe that we put in the ground, everybody has to contribute to those costs. That's how water and sewer is portioned out in the community, is that everybody pays in a metered system, everybody pays a base cost. So you pay $50 a month because you have to pay for the whole system.
Oh, I
And then you
understand that.
And then you would pay a consumption rate. So what I think and maybe I didn't make it clear, what I was suggesting is that because we don't have a system, when we turn the water off, we don't necessarily want to charge people who are going away for an extended period of time for the actual water that they're not consuming. We want them to pay the base rate. So what we suggest is the metered base rate is $50. That covers sort of the infrastructure costs of, a pipe going down the road towards your past your house. And then, a branch off to get from the main to the shut off, like to the curb stop. And the curb stop and your water meter and all of those things, right? There's the infrastructure cost. So what I'm suggesting is that because we're not metered, that we just ask people who are away for extended periods of time and have had their water shut off, is that they don't pay our unmetered rate. They just pay the $50 metered rate.
I have
base
no
rate.
problems with that. It's the same as Fortis.
Mhm.
But to be given that $478 or $487 bill when you haven't been there at all,
Mhm.
I think is unrealistic. I have no problems with the service charge and whatever.
Mhm.
And that's paying for your operational and capital costs. But to have the full whammy, I
No.
think we have to address that.
Yeah, no, that's not the intent. The intent
Okay.
is that we would treat those houses that are either permanently uninhabited and are not paying for services, or who are going on extended vacations, or they're gonna have the house uninhabited for a period of time, that they just pay that $50 base, which is basically covering the cost of our infrastructure. I wrote that in the briefing note, and I think,
Make sure. Yep.
sorry, I should put my glasses on, eh?
So just while we're searching for that, I made a few phone calls today, talked to a few cities and smaller communities about this same thing. What do you do when somebody wants their water turned off if they're going on holiday and stuff like that? So out of the 5 communities that I called, 3 of them offer their citizens, all their citizens, 1 free turn off and turn on per year. They offer one only. So the other ones do, the other 2 do exactly what we kind of do.
You turn it off.
You get 1 free turn on and return off. So they'll turn it off and turn it on. You get 1 free one. That's it. Now, they're on water meters, okay? So this is more for construction situations or whatever, or broken pipes, et cetera. So that's what's out there. Some communities have agreed the fact that you have said that it's unfair. So I'm just throwing that
Yeah.
fly into the ointment because that's how some of them have got around it, and others are simply just doing the base rate situation.
Free turn on and turn off. I mean, I don't go down south anymore, but we do have quite a few residents that do. And they're usually seniors, so that would help them.
For the base rate situation.
Yeah, and with this stuff, like I've looked at many, like when we're doing these bylaw updates and looking at fees, like we look at a lot of different bylaws, try and stick to communities that are in our region or our size across the province. Like we're not comparing to Metro Vancouver, right? That doesn't benefit us in any way. They have a whole different way of doing things. But when we're doing this, we're looking for like, where are we in comparison to those other places in the services that we offer, both the type of service and the cost. So again, this is council's decision. I just show you what we know will do the closest to dealing with our funding gaps or with our revenue gaps. If council wants to give, much like you have the discount if you pay by November 31st, you have a discount on the water, which means we lose revenue. So again, anywhere where council wants to see some sort of bonus kind of situation for groups, that's okay. I think when you're privileging one group over another, so there is a level of like, most people who are gone for an extended period of time are people who can afford it. Whereas the people who are not gone for an extended period of time are often young families who are, only making $70,000 per household, which is a very low, combined wage in a household. So just be aware that if you are thinking about seniors who are going to Arizona for the winter versus young families who are making minimum wage at their jobs, watch how you're privileging some groups over another. So I just want to put that out there.
So, Councillor Turner.
Okay, I would say that not having one free on and off, but you reduce the amount that the turn on and off during regular business hours for someone who's going on an extended period of time. I'm not talking about a contractor who's constantly turning the water on and off. But if someone is going away for an extended period of time, you could reduce that $100 turn off. And then I also, I don't want to get into philosophical argument here, but a lot of seniors who go south because they can afford it. They can't afford to, eat here, but they can afford to eat down south. So we can't figure out who's got the money and who hasn't. But I think that for people that are going off an extended period of time, we could look at the $100 and reduce that.
So I would be looking for direction from the whole of council on how that would be addressed.
Councillor Baxter.
I'm fine with the $100 fee. Like, if somebody's asking for their water to be turned off, they should pay a fee. You have a person coming out in the truck, using the little wand thing, trying to find the shut off, turning it off, then coming back and then turning it back on when the person wants it back on. I think we should be charging people because it's taking somebody's time away from another job in the city that could be done.
Thank you. Councillor Rogan? Oh.
It's almost different. So, I need to understand more the situation here, like how often people call to turn the water, off. If the water is off, what is the bill right now that we don't have water meters? Can you provide a little bit more of information so that we can have a clear picture of what my recommendation should be?
So ultimately, the way that services are feed is that if an activity benefits a resident, then that resident should pay the fee. So that's why going to turn the water on and off does not benefit the community. It benefits the resident. So that resident pays the costs of doing that work. Whether it takes 5 minutes or not, we bill by the hour kind of thing. But Councillor Baxter's right. There are places where curb stops are hidden and they take time to find, but not all of them. Some of them, we have them GPS. So the fee around turning it on, turning it off, is just, it's set as a cost recovery fee. It's not related to water consumption or rates. It's just set as a cost recovery fee. Does that answer your question?
So just an example, this is before I became mayor, in my neighborhood, because there was a lot of damaged houses from the flood, some people's water lines would break as it got colder. And I informed one gentleman who lived beside me that his water had been running for 24 hours. He let it run another 5 days because he didn't want to pay the shut-off fee. So it just ran in the house for 5 days. So finally I had to phone the city and say, this water is running. You could clearly hear it. It was hissing. So you run into situations like that. Another one, I had a gentleman phone me up. He disputed his bill. He has his water shut off because he was redoing some plumbing in the house. He got it all done, but he didn't get the right size fittings, turned it on, water went all over the place. Water had to be shut back off again. So he wanted to be reimbursed for the second time because his parts were incorrect. So where do you draw a line on that one sort of thing? You might want to hire a professional. So you do feel bad, but when, there a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to pay for the shut off, so I'm just going to let it run. And that kind of happened in our neighborhood for quite some time. There was a lot of water running in neighborhoods because they didn't want to pay the but the only problem is that was waived during the flood situation. They didn't realize that. So anyway, where do we want to go with this?
So thank you for the information. I would feel comfortable with the recommended fee, but also I would like to add the one-time allow free for them to use at no cost.
So would we say, let's say a contractor is
No.
building a house or, no, so it's an established and the resident it has to go.
Taxpayer.
Okay,
Taxpayer.
okay. We'll work
For an
on some language.
extended period of time.
We'll
They're
work on
going
some
for an
language.
extended period of time.
Well, I don't know if you can, so
I guess
one of
we
the
can't
reasons,
put
one of
that
the
in.
reasons that I had the conversation with these three cities, because they could not decide who was doing the extended period of time. So they just said, everybody gets it. That's a taxpayer. Anybody that's a household that pay taxes has that option. Councillor Baxter.
I think we should leave it as it is, just because we're taking away time from other jobs in the city and we're already short-staffed. and this, whoever turns off their water is doing it because it benefits them. It doesn't benefit everybody in the city.
Counselor Cherney.
Well, I'll disagree on that because it doesn't benefit someone. It's a prevention. The water is turned off usually for a reason because they're usually gone during the winter. And they just don't want to have any problems with insurance or flooded house. I would have gone with a lower fee, but if Councillor Olgan wants to go with one free on and off, that's even better. I'll go with
This,
that one.
this side of the room. Counselor Petrosi.
Yes, one free, I agree.
And we leave the rate as it is.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Are we done with sewer and water now? Look at you.
Anything else? Yeah, okay, so just to summarize, we will extend the period for this sort of catch-up increase to 3 years, so into 2027. And we will do we'll figure out some language around, maybe I'll get the mayor to tell me which ones he called tomorrow, so I can look at the bylaws.
Kamloops.
Sure, Kamloops makes more money than we do, stop calling Kamloops.
I know people there.
Don't talk to them. They have a bigger tax base than we do. Solid waste collection, we're not seeing any real changes in solid waste collection. However, this is a place that's a risk for us, and we're not recommending a change here because we are recommending such big changes in water and sewer. So we're in a situation where we don't have the reserves to fund the replacement truck. So we have the residential truck that we've ordered, and the commercial truck is no longer operable. I think it's still out of commission. It has been for a couple of weeks. So we're looking at some alternative solutions around how to Frankenstein a truck. I think the director has some ideas about getting a chassis and taking the package and putting it on a new chassis, and hopefully that all sorts itself out, which would be more cost effective than purchasing a whole new truck. But we don't have sufficient reserves to do this. So that means borrowing is a high likelihood to get these 2 new trucks into play in the next 5 years. It is a place also where we are seeing increases in the TNRD rates for our landfill tipping fees. And in particular, we get $100,000 in funding from Recycling BC, which does support some of the costs. However, it's not actually supposed to support our operational costs. It's supposed to be for education and different things like that. And right now we're using it to support a lot of our operational costs. It's not the intent of the funding grant. But people are not doing a great job with recycling. And every time that happens, they don't like to call it a fine, but we get less of the $100,000. No. So every quarter, we're losing some of that funding. So it's really important that we have an opportunity to actually use that funding to do the education stuff, so people do a better job recycling. But ultimately, when you look at Facebook and people get mad about this thing, there's some perception that we're going to sort their recycling for them, that if you put a poopy diaper in your recycling, that we're going to fix that. And that is not a service that the city provides. It's impossible. We would have to have several more staff for that kind of work to be a transfer station, right? And so every time an unclean load comes in for recycling, none of it gets recycled. The whole load goes to landfill.
Counselor Richard.
I would like to volunteer Councillor Baxter and O'Gean to do a council corner video of how to recycle and stuff like that. I think they would have the most fun.
Just
I
use the
mean-
word poopy diaper in it.
I didn't say poopy diapers.
I said poopy diaper.
Yeah, I wouldn't, because I think a lot of people, I was one of the 7 people that saw your video, and when I saw it, it was 7 people. I think it would be good to use that space for the YouTube video.
It's for everybody. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
and then we could do that, because I think that people would watch it and laugh, and then don't throw this, don't throw that, and then how to, do not do this, and make it funny. Like what we did in 2019.
Plastics are the most inflating.
Is this,
They really are.
do you have a relevant question or?
No, I was just saying that to combat this, to help with the fees, we should get out there and be vocal, and it should be us, because we could be like, look, you guys are making a mess and costing us money. And just be very frank and stare over your glass. No, I'm kidding. But I think it would be effective, because we need to get me.
We're gonna get the
Ridiculous.
communications officer to script this for you. We'll get back to you.
I think if we find a bin that is not correct, we should have Counselor
Richard.
Etchart stand there and just look at the house for about an hour, just
Raise an eyebrow.
and do this every once in a while.
Okay, one of these.
Moving on.
So we're not in a position where we're recommending an increase to solid waste collection, but it is a risk area. And again, we don't want to, as we've been talking about, there's a lot of burden that we have to place on the residents to try and get ourselves into a better position. And so I think it's reasonable for us to just hold off on this for a while, recognizing that we may have to enter into borrowing in the future to get those trucks done. In the near future, near term, call that near term, within this board, like in this 5-year window.
Okay.
Very unfortunate, but please do better with your recycling. And I know we all don't do a great job, right? Like every time you don't wash out a can and they see that, it all goes to the landfill. Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, I brought this up at TNRD because they do pay people to stand there and pick that stuff out. So you know what? Do your job. Mm.
So with the cemetery fees, which is the next schedule, we want to keep fees stable for residents. We do have a problem in that we're running out of space in our cemetery. I want to say we have like 3 or 4 lots left at this point. And then we have to start surveying again.
Mhm.
One of the trends that our staff member who runs our cemetery program is that non-residents are buying plots because we're cheaper than the coast. So to keep those fees stable for our residents, the recommendation is we increase the non-residential costs. And then the other place where we're seeing sort of the big things are we've had an exhumation this year. No one on staff had done one. And the staff cost and the equipment cost was significantly higher than what we charge. So they don't happen very frequently, but I think the idea is that we actually have to try and cost recover. And it doesn't matter if you're a resident or a non-resident, we've taken the difference out. So it only is just exhumation,
So
but it's fairly costly.
I have a question. Columbarium niche,
Mhm.
middle row, any row, $1,800 to put ashes inside. Why is that so expensive compared to everything else? A grave site is actually cheaper by a long shot.
Columbariums, when you put a columbarium in, it's the typical process is the cost recover through the sale of the niches. So if you have a columbarium that costs you $20,000 and each niche, you have 10 niches in it, there's a cost recovery requirement. Because there's no taxation for this. It's user driven. However, columbariums are a necessary thing because most cemeteries are running out of room. In Europe, they just pile people on top of each other, right? In some countries, they actually unbury you so that people get buried.
So just a question. I know with the columbarium, you're allowed to put 2.
Yeah.
Is it 1,800 one shot or 1,800 both
It's
times?
for the niche.
Okay, so you can put 2 in and it's $1,800.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have we're actually meeting about the cemetery bylaws on our priority list. So we're meeting about that next week with the staff that sort of our finance staff and our public works staff 2 leads to talk about some of the things around that cemetery bylaw that need to be updated. And one of them is that people buy a full plot and they can put 4 cremations in it. So they buy a plot, they put 4 cremations in it, but they don't buy a niche, nor do they buy a plot that is meant for cremations. because then it becomes more expensive. So we have to figure out the proper way to cost these things out. And part of that is through bylaw change.
Counselor Richard.
I was just wondering, there are some people where you were just mentioning about the stacking. And I was just wondering if right now we have very much requests for that.
We do have requests for some second burials in a plot. And it is allowed, it's part of the bylaw. So you
Okay.
can do it.
Because that would help with that, but I would imagine it would probably be most popular only with people who are residents, but because they would live nearby, well,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know.
But there's a lot of cleanup that has to be done. Like there are plots that have been purchased and never used. And they were purchased long enough ago that one might anticipate that the intended person is passed on. So we have empty plots.
Or maybe
that-
they moved and got buried somewhere else.
Yeah, like, so we've got to just. I couldn't give you an exact number, but it's a thing. So we have to do a lot of work to kind of clean all that up and figure out. Because we don't really have additional.
Isn't there a lot of wasted space in the area to the left, of the green space, cemetery? Like over where the gravel and the big headstones are? There's a lot of wasted space there.
On the old cemetery.
And in some places, again, in some of the sites. They weren't just exact about where the actual body is. So in those older ones in particular, they could be. The headstone and the body may not align. So there's some, got to give some cushion around those spaces, so that might be. That
Hold
would
on.
be very expensive. Ground penetrating radar, super expensive.
Counselor Egan.
I've just said what I was gonna say.
Oh, nobody heard you.
Oh.
Counselor Baxter.
So exhumations, why are we not charging them? Because it's the service they're asking for is to be exhumed from why can they not bear the full cost of it?
It's up to you. Again, this is sort of in the range that other municipalities, this is sort of in the range of, and I've seen some that were 3,000 and more, some that were less, so we're kind of in the middle of the range. But it is very expensive, right? So we had like an excavator and multiple staff in the field. We had staff in the office that were working through the process. So
Was-
it is very costly.
Was this a court ordered exhumation?
Nope.
So I would say that if we have an exhumation that's not a court order, that the full fee should be on the people that want it.
Yeah, cost.
Because I don't understand why we would shoulder any of that burden.
And the
There's a-
non-residents, like, can we find out what other like jurisdictions, even if it's Victoria, Vancouver, and find a price so that it doesn't make it,
Yeah, and that's again.
yeah, because there's a lot of residents that have been here all their lives and they want to be up there, if there's no spots for them, it's not fair to them.
And again, this is in the range. It's not, it could be more, it could be less. It's in the range of other communities around the non-resident fees, which are always higher than the resident fees.
Counselor Hogan.
Just to give you an idea, in Kamloops is 1,200 compared with the non-residential fee that we have right now, it's 900.
Yeah, and so the proposed amount is 1,000 for 2025. Yeah. Okay, you tell me what to put and I will write it in.
What are we talking about?
The non-resident grave purchase of grave, as well as potentially the burial fees, right? Don't forget, you purchase a site and then there's burial fees in addition to that. Wow, okay.
Well, hold on there. Let's see what the rest of the council has to say. Counselor Sharney.
Well, a resident is 735 and a non-resident is 1,000. To me, it should be a lot more than $65. Yes, minimum double. Yeah.
So would you want to keep the burial fees the same or increase the burial fees for non-residents? So right now, if you went 2,000 for the plot and the burial fees are 1,000, that would be $3,000. Versus, just over 1,500 for a plot and a burial for a resident.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, again, because the burial fees is $782.25 for a resident, 1,000 for a non-resident, and that's only $218.
$218.
Yes, so I think we have to protect our space for our residents, and if this is a thing that people from out of town are coming, they're gonna have to pay dearly for it.
Councillor Richard.
I think we have to be very careful with this too, because there are situations where people have lived their whole life and due to physical ailments have been forced to have to move to go live with their kids, but they were from here.
Yeah,
And so
that's different.
it was unintentional that they didn't want to go. So I think that we have to be very careful here before willy-nilly we're doubling the rates, because if they were
Documentation, though, they would have documentation saying, hey, look, they were born in Merritt, they
great,
lived in Merritt.
but if you're, doing the permit for the cemetery and your staff, and you're like, "Wow, you lived in Maple Ridge." I mean, at what
Yeah.
point are we gonna be telling people, no, from 2020 to 2024, you lived in Maple Ridge, so now you're paying the non-resident, like, really, like, what are staff supposed to do? I'm just thinking, like, it's fine for us to say that, but then what happens to the staff member who's trying to do the billing for the deceased person, and they're already upset, and then are they gonna blow up at staff? And then really require this upcoming safety equipment that we have later in the budget because somebody wants to rip their head off? Like, I'm just saying, like, be devil's advocate
Wouldn't they
here.
excuse me, wouldn't they already have bought a plot?
Yeah, most of
Maybe.
their residents,
Yeah.
before they leave.
Yes.
My parents bought plots back in the eighties and they
Yeah.
never used them.
I'm just saying that
Mhm.
already, like, you have
Oh,
your
we've
plot
got
at
lots of that.
700, it's
We've got lots.
1,000, I don't know. I think that funeral costs enough as it is. Going from 1,500 to 3,000, like that's a lot. Like, and people are already upset, and
Well, how much is it in Vancouver?
estate fees
Or
and
Meadows?
like just. Ooh.
Well, what I'm saying is, I understand that because I know some people get to that stage where they can't stay in Merritt because of health reasons and then they go. But the family can always prove that they lived in Merritt for 50 years. That's a Merritt resident.
Sure,
That's a Merritt resident that had to go away for health reasons.
Yeah.
They're still a Merritt resident.
okay,
And I think that that's fine.
but we're not the ones
But
that,
someone that's lived in Maple Ridge all of their life and wants to come up in here and get buried? No. No,
okay.
because the CAO was saying it's cheaper here to get buried. So obviously we have to match what it is down in the
I
coast.
mean, I'm surprised that people would want to be buried here if they didn't have a life here.
How much
because-
is it at Oceanside? It's in Burnaby.
Vancouver, it's
27.
So I'm just looking at Mountain View Cemetery. A casket grave. Whoa, $27,000?
That's what he just said.
And then the internment is $1,600 for a single depth
How
adult
much for an
casket.
exhumation?
Oh my God, I don't, where is that? Disinterment or exhumation is relatively inexpensive. It's $2,775.
Well, there you go.
Okay, well, it's still more.
Councillor Egan? Oh, wasn't sure.
That sounds expensive.
Councillor Baxter?
So like, can we find out fees from like even larger areas so that we're kind of in line with them so that non-residents aren't being like, oh, let's go to this cheap place and just bury our
Well-
grandma, grandpa.
This is the city of Vancouver's fees.
Yeah, you just read it.
And they're gonna be very similar probably in Pitt Meadows and Surrey and Burnaby. They're gonna be very similar because the cost of land, right?
And we have to protect her.
So maybe this is not unreasonable. And we can look at writing into the cemetery bylaw, what is a resident versus a non-resident? We can define that however council chooses. Right? Versus discussing whether it's too much or who, we can write that into the bylaw.
Councillor Owen?
Thank you. So I'm trying to hear both sides, right? So I'm trying to understand. I agree with Councillor Baxter and Councillor Charlie, but also I hear Councillor Edger's concerns. So I think that it's a delicate situation that we have to think about how we want to move forward. So I feel that the non-resident fees are low. So I would not go that high as double. but I would consider just an increase, a gradual increase. So right now we are again guessing, we are just doing the quick searches to understand what other cities are charging. So perhaps, if we increase it to 50% and next year we can just, do another assessment to go over and determine what could be the next approach.
So you're suggesting perhaps 1,500 instead of 2,000 for a space and then another 1,500 for the burial fees. And then we can look at again next year to see how that impacts use of our cemetery.
Regan.
Thank you. I was wondering what do you mean by a deeper depth, Ariel?
So some people want to be buried deeper than the standard 6 feet.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that would allow for more stacking then, wouldn't it?
It does require additional equipment.
Mhm.
We would have to purchase additional equipment. But
Okay, and as far as the fees go, I'm sorry, I think you gotta double it because look, 27,000 for anywhere in the Lower Mainland practically, and we're at 1,000. No wonder they're coming up here. I don't think that we need a whole year to determine whether that's going to deter them or not. Because I don't think it's going to deter them.
because it's not $27,000.
Even at 2,000,
Yeah.
Councillor Baxter.
I think we need some more information, especially since we only have 3 burial plots. If we have that left, if 3 non-residents come from Vancouver, all those, and then we have to survey and find more land.
So right now, we're not allowing non-residents to purchase those plots. Just so you know, we're protecting those
A lot of
plots.
communities do that. Councillor Tarney.
Does the cemetery have more land? Like-
Yes.
We can spread out, right? But it does have to be surveyed.
It has to
What's the
all be
cost?
surveyed, the plots have to be sized, it has to be GIS, so it has to be all globally positioned, it's like a whole system.
So
right?
when you're facing the cemetery from the road over to the right is where the area
Where the
is,
trees are.
where the trees are? And
Well, there
I
is,
don't know if there's any more,
there is some, I was just up there, there is some above and,
Oh, is there?
yeah, we went through this, I think in 2017 where we expanded up above because we had 1 plot left. That was it. And then
Yes.
we went over the road behind the columbarium, that whole part
Well,
we did.
So
Yeah.
if
we just did it, right?
so CAO, if we're down to 3 plots,
Mhm.
should we not be trying to get a reserve set up for further expansion of our cemetery?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
You know?
CFO, what was the last expansion that we just finished? What was the cost of that expansion? It was a fairly hefty amount of money, $100,000 or something. Oh, more than $100,000. And again, we've used that now. It's done.
To the winter.
No, it wasn't
No.
just the columbarium, it was plots.
Oh, my. Excited.
Councillor Tarney, anything more? Okay, so let's make a decision on this. What do we want to do here? I'm dying to find out.
I say we double each of the fees for non-residents and we write into the bylaw what a non-resident is. And that we save whatever plots we have left until we can have actual plots for future non-residents.
And I'll add that it's part of the reserve for expansion of the cemetery.
Councillor Petrosi.
and we have to actually find out how many plots you said have not been used. People are probably deceased, sitting empty.
So there are some places where if you purchased a plot and you haven't used it within a certain amount of time. How much? It's about 70 years. You no longer own the plot. Your family no longer owns the plot. It reverts back to the city. Probably not, but we don't know for sure. So we have to go back and really dig into the whole cemetery process.
Don't use the term dig.
Sorry. Investigate further.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think, did you find it, or he's gonna look and kind of give you a sense? And this is where, in yesterday's budget discussions, and this is why the fees and schedules or the fees and charges and the budget are really so closely aligned and they have to happen at the same time is because when you're thinking about how do we make these costs work? How do we pay for all these services? It really is about planning ahead. So like yesterday when we talked about, how do we, I think Council Egan said, $25 on every utility bill to cover, to start a reserve for rec facilities, right? Like, it's that kind of levy that you're talking about where we have to do some sort of each program almost needs its own reserve for us to be able to say, like, we're saving specifically for this, so nobody steals that money to use somewhere else, right? So
That's easy to explain.
You gotta turn your mic on. But you'll have to, well,
That's
you
very-
kinda gotta wait your turn there, but go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead, you're on.
Okay, I was just gonna say, and that's very easy to explain to people. I think they'll understand that. Say,
Mhm.
okay, that's $25 twice a year that's going to recreation.
mhm.
Councillor Baxter.
Even in the columbarium, I think it should be double for non-resident.
Okay.
I was bringing that up.
I'm just writing here, double all fees.
We'll call that the Charney death tax.
We'll come up with a bylaw or like an amendment to say what a non-resident is and what a resident
there
is,
will
so
be a-
that they do not get charged the non-resident fee. if
Yeah,
they
so there'll
were-
be a definition in the new
Okay.
bylaw that will have that. So we'll figure out what that's gonna say. In
Moving
decorative urns.
on.
Sorry, guys have like,
Are we done with, so we've kind of beat that to death?
this gets worse and
Yes.
worse as we go here. I lost what I was doing. Where's my thing? Right. So in this one, again, not a lot of change. We are doing the DCCs. So we had a DCCs project, so the development cost charges, which is a fee that developers pay to support increased infrastructure in the community. That project is a couple of years old. We're trying to wrap up the first version of that. And now we have the opportunity to expand the scope of those, where those charges can go, as well as create an ACC, so an amenities cost charges. So previously we couldn't use DCCs to do things like rec centers or parks. But now we will be able to charge for amenities cost charges under the new legislation. There was also an expansion in what fire services, what fire equipment could be used, the DCCs could be used for under the new legislation. So ultimately in this section, there's not a whole lot of big changes. There are some new areas around service charges that we've never charged people for, that I think we need to do. And so again, this is very much work that we do for the individual versus work that we do for the community. So that's why the burden goes to the individual or the contractor or whoever's doing it. One of the big places we'll see an increase is in the OCP amendments. And again, this is a very, very individualized task that our staff do for an individual person or an individual developer, and it's super time intensive. So when we do these kinds of amendments to the OCP, there's a lot of work that goes in that could be going into, approving some more development permits or approving the width of a road, right? We're doing a lot of work on these and taking away from other projects. So, so this is a place where we're trying to do a little bit more cost recovery for the services that we provide. And I think, Council Olgan not long ago, maybe at one of the last meetings, said, where else are we looking at generating revenue? And this is a place where we can certainly do that. We have to be careful though, because some communities are not getting CMHC funding because they're charging too much for developers. So some communities didn't get the Housing Accelerator Fund because their DCCs were too high. Even though that wasn't actually a part of the criteria. So we have to balance what the charges are versus, will we lose development? But we're still relatively low in most of these charges, and many of them hadn't been updated in a long, long time, including the building permitting fees that the building bylaws currently with our legal consultant to review it, and then it'll be coming to policy early in the new year. This will be again, some adjustments to those, what kinds of fees we have based on what's in the building bylaw.
Councillor Egan.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, where does the new four-step program for housing new builds fit into all of this?
Well, we don't do it yet, so we haven't done it. We're not
Well,
doing it.
that's,
We're not doing it.
we don't do it. That's the contractor that
Yeah.
charges the person who's building the
Oh,
house.
okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm sorry, I just have to backtrack. If you go back to cemetery fees in your brief, in the fourth line is missing. It says, although this is a blank, and then it's
Oh,
a blank line.
Thank you. I will correct that. Thank you. I gotta tell you that the CO doesn't let me put my briefing notes into the system because I broke it. So I send her my briefing notes and she cuts and pastes them into the system. So between the two of us, one of us missed a line because I broke the system.
Way to go.
So
It's probably in the
No,
budget
it's-
now.
We're taking it out of your paycheck.
Anything more, Councillor Egan? Thank you.
So if everybody's kind of okay, again, looking at many different bylaws, fees and charges bylaws, and looking at places where we weren't charging fees and where we could cost recover some more without jacking up prices on individual parts of development.
Councillor Egan.
These are all fair relative to other communities
Yeah.
of the same size?
Yeah. And again, they're all different, right? Like that's the hardest part is you're like, oh, okay, is this like the same fee as we're charging? Because they've named it something different and you're like, oh, I don't know. So yeah, not a lot of big stuff in planning and development. So if you're okay with that, I can move on to airport. So airport, for the entire time the airport has existed, probably tax revenue has subsidized the operation of the airport, despite the fact that very few residents actually benefit from the airport. So we haven't seen any operational capital cost recovery for this facility in probably ever. And so we're recommending significant changes to the user fees to close that gap and to rely less on general tax revenue. So we're limiting the subsidization of a facility that very few people use. And we spend a lot of time trying to obtain grants in order to update the infrastructure in this facility. So for example, previously for fuel, we were charging the cost. There was no profit being made on the fuel. There was no consideration for the cost of replacing the actual infrastructure to provide fuel. Right? Tie down fees were very minimal. There's no thought about what the cost of having the apron paved, having the runway paved again, like none of that was covered in any way under the airport. So we are asking for some fairly significant changes to the airport fees to try and cost recover.
So one other thing I'd like to bring up about that is we need to have a certain section on firefighting season. When we have 24 helicopters parked up there and 24 cargo trailers, and we have people living on site, we need to start charging them for that. These guys are making $4,000 to $7,000 an hour, and when they're flying. So we need
I'm in
to,
the wrong job.
well, you don't have a $4 million helicopter sitting there. So when they are here fighting fires, now I understand you don't want to hinder somebody because they're here fighting fires. In the past, we've allowed them, if they fueled up at our tanks, we didn't charge them to be there. But things are changing now because at one point in time, the forestry only allowed locals to fight fires that had helicopters. Now we're seeing people starting to show up in March and April and then parking up there for 4 months, waiting to get into rotation. They need to have their tail booms read and we need to send them bills. It's that simple.
And so we have some thoughts and we'll be speaking to the Ministry of Forestry about this because ultimately their most of the work, many of the helicopters up there are being contracted directly from the provincial government. And so instead of having it be related to this rates and fees, we will actually work with this through contract.
So we also need to make sure that we do not have off-site fuel trucks parked on our. And we also, we do have now more land. It is against the law for us to park helicopters on the taxiway, because that is our secondary airport in case we have an OTAMs and we shut down the airport. There's been times where there's been 15 helicopters parked on that. We cannot have that in the future. It's got to stop because we can be in contravention or liable for somebody who's coming in and having a problem. They can't get on the runway and all of a sudden our emergency runway is plugged up with helicopters. It's happened once already, so.
And I think that's a really important point because again, we don't have a financial plan for staffing and doing that work, right? Like we don't have a staff member who has, we have staff members who go out and do it, but in their job description and in their work plans, there's no actual time for the work that the mayor is talking about. And so cost recovering from those operators is really important because we are using our staff time or we're having to bring on additional seasonal staff in order to do that work.
So what I would suggest is that we come up with a package and we hand it to the Ministry of Forests to hand it out to their contractors as they come. So they see what the city of Merritt is requesting. And if you don't want to park at our airport, then you can go somewhere else. But that way we hand them a package with the numbers to call. All they've got to do is register their tail boom the minute they get in and then the minute they leave. That's all we got to know. And if they choose to buy fuel from us, that's great. But the point of the matter is we are sustaining damage up there from heavy vehicles. We get a heavy helicopter up there, like there's lights, mediums and heavies. If we get a heavy up there on a hot August day, he starts sinking into the tarmac, which then we have to fix. So there are costs to that. So I would just like, I think we need to have a bit of separation when it comes to fire season. We've got to have some rules on that.
Yeah, and I do think that's contractual and with the Ministry of Forests is that they have an obligation to protect our infrastructure.
Councillor Baxter.
Are our fees consistent with our municipalities of our size, the airports? Are they consistent with everything across the board?
There are some of them that have a lot more fees, but they actually have airport managers, so they can actually enforce them. This is what we realistically think we can enforce based on our resources.
Councillor Turner.
That was my question, the annual rental, the tie downs. $575 a year seems pretty late.
Well, it was $15 a month for a while. This is much better. 3. But the thing is we do get a lot of cross-country traffic. We probably service 500 to 700 planes a year up there, mostly on the weekends. You'll just notice the big brand new yellow one was flying around the other day. Every time that thing touches down, there's a $2,000 cha-ching in our pocket every single time. So we do get a lot of schools come here. It's easier place to land. So we do get a lot of out of town traffic. Councilor Petrosi.
How many events are held up there? Is I guess for the runway per day, the events that are held up there.
We had 3 up. We had 3. We had Airport Appreciation Day, which is a city event, but we also had the drags and then we had the Gymkhana.
Right.
So they want to come back 4 times this year. So Daryl Smeaton, who's doing the drags, wants to come back for twice this year. We'll see how that all goes.
Okay. So we're looking at more events.
Yeah. So the whole idea is to get more revenue out of the airport because we're certainly not getting it from 3 planes that sit there and maybe fly every once in a while.
Yeah.
So yeah. So we're trying to make the airport a little bit more friendlier. And that's why we did the earthworks. The fencing is in.
Right.
So now we're going to market.
So even car shows, anything that we can attract.
Anything and everything.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything? Oh, Councilor Charney.
The money that we generate, does it go back to the airport?
So again, right now, there is no reserve fund for the airport. So you'll see we have this in capital investment charge of 15% of the build cost of the so what we determined is the actual cost of the airport and the fuel. We need to make on fuel, we need to make a 35% increase. Right? We need to make 35% more than we were making. So what we're suggesting is that 15% of the build cost be for capital investment. So that would be the generation of a reserve fund for.
But
the
what if,
airport.
like, the mayor was saying that this yellow plane, every time it touches down, it's $2,000. When we rent the runway out, we generate money. Where does that money go? Is it going back
It
into
goes
the airport?
just to general revenue. All of our stuff goes back to general revenue unless it's a capital generation, right? Unless we're generating capital funds. So in this particular case, this is a capital generation. We can put that into a reserve, particularly for the airport.
So just from my 25+ years up at the airport, not a lot changes up there. It just doesn't get used that much. So we've kind of decided to go on grant funding to help with certain things, such as paving the secondary runway, such as putting up the fence, the earthworks. I'm not really sure a reserve fund would be all that well used up there to a certain degree, because not a lot changes up there. And strike me dead if it's just, I don't see a lot of change that goes on up there.
So the biggest ones are the fueling equipment and the gates to keep vehicles out. And so there are those parts that are like operational capital.
The gates now, we didn't have them.
Yes,
there.
so that's why we're suggesting that there be some capital investment funds so that we can do those changes.
Councillor Baxter.
Are we gonna charge more than just at cost for the fuel? Is that just?
Yeah, that's where it says the fuel is actual cost plus 25%
Councillor Regan.
for our profit.
Thank you. I was just wondering, is there different fees for different size planes or the ultralights or?
Nope.
No?
So in a lot of places, they have landing fees,
Yeah,
but again, they have somebody observing this, right? So like in Vernon, for instance, they have landing fees and it's different for the size, landing fees for the size of the plane. But they have somebody who watches this things happen, so they're logging them in. We don't have the resources for that. So for parking, it doesn't seem to be much of a difference. Doesn't matter what you're parking size wise, it's the landing that causes the damage to the runway.
yeah, well, I was also wondering too, when that ultralight, was it an ultralight? That crashed into one of the buildings up there, was that ever fixed?
Well, that was the BC forestry building and they fixed it, yes.
Okay.
Not our bill.
Not our building.
So if everybody's happy with kind of this and with the idea that we're gonna work through the firefighting season through more contracts negotiations rather than rates and fees. Okay, Claybanks RV Park. Again, these are just the sort of the 5% increases. You will see coming in January from the Director of Community Services, some different scenarios for the future of Claybanks. And we have some updates that we'll have by then about how the dike will affect the number of sites.
Councillor Attorney.
I just checked out, Logan Lake and Golden both have municipal, campgrounds. Logan Lake is $32 for a full hookup. Golden is $52 for a full hookup. So we're kind of in the middle. I mean, I think we could even increase that to $42 even. But one thing that I have really noticed with Logan Lake is excellent campground. The money generated from that campground goes back into the campground. It doesn't go into general reserve. Therefore, they have expanded their RV park. They have fixed it up and it's a great park. And that's what I would kind of like to see with the Claybanks is that money from there goes back into the park so that we get a first class RV park, that we're known for that and people will want to come and stay there.
So I think Mr. Zackel's mentally taking some notes on things that he can present in regards to that when he brings this to you in the new year. Does council want to see some increases in these fees, or are we happy right now and to review again in 26 once you've had a sense or some ideas around what the director's bringing forward?
Let's see what the rest of the table has to say before we.
Sorry, I didn't realize there were more.
Councillor Baxter.
I checked and these fees are kind of consistent with Kamloops and Princeton. So it's not that bad. It's just once Claybanks is fully operational and we know where the dike is going and we know how many sites are left, I think a review in 2026 would be great.
Councillor. Good. Councillor Egan.
Do we have monthly rates?
No, no,
You sure?
we do not. I took them out. I took them out because we don't necessarily want to subsidize people living in the park.
I'm thinking of construction workers.
Well, so I think one of the things that council should think about is that if people are living in the park at a reduced rate, then local businesses are losing revenue
Mhm.
for people that could accommodate. So that's the why I took out the monthlies, because we don't necessarily want to take money away from local hotels and motels for the RV park. That we don't want to, as a municipality, we don't necessarily want to compete with local business. Right? Because that impacts the economic picture of the
Well,
community.
I know some people that have been staying in there for past years. I can hardly wait till this opens up again. Because they got a really good rate there and they travel with those large bus mobile homes.
Mhm.
So they're not going to be going into a hotel.
Yeah, but we don't want to plug up our thing where somebody's staying there for 4 months and we can't accommodate people coming in and out of town. I'm not for long term at all.
Municipal campgrounds do not allow.
Long term.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
lots of them are like a week to 2 weeks is kind of and then you have to rotate out.
Council Petrosi.
Yeah, we actually stayed in Princeton this summer and it was, I think around the $60 to $65, so fairly high. So
But you're on the golf course there though.
Hey?
You're at the golf course.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you don't get a free round.
But, and you know what, just traveling around BC and talking to people that have actually stayed at Clay Banks in the past, they have loved it. They love staying here, so just can't wait to get it up and running, so.
Yeah, we'll see how the
Yeah.
dike affects
Yeah.
it.
Councillor Itcher.
Just talking about what Councillor Egan was touching on was that before the flood, we did have some people who were here doing contract work and other, contracts that they were working on, construction and whatnot, and they were living there paying whatever, $550, or maybe it was even up to $750 a month at the time for full-time hookups. So I can understand we did lose some spots after the flood, but I can appreciate some people that are in RVs are not looking to be in a hotel because that's what they live in. So if we're not going to accommodate, that's fine. It's just, if we could have a few, fine. There was a lot of people that were consistent. They're good rent payers. And we did have that before, not all that long ago, just before the flood. I do like the idea of leaving the fees the way they are because I think we need to get it re-rented before we see how things are going. Then I would like to see it be a city contract, not necessarily a contractor person, but I mean,
All the options.
all the options, yeah. But I think it's unfortunate because some people, like Councillor Egan was saying, are in RV trailers, they're not in motels, maybe they have a dog or whatever the situation is, and they can't be in a motel. The people that would be in motels would have been like your Enbridge workers or whoever, so I don't know, I mean, even, yeah, Peter Brothers, whatever.
Well,
If
you've got Moon Shadows that takes long term.
Yeah, it was just, they were paying good rent in months, even October, November, where we had few campers and it was nice revenue for the system. And if we were gonna do maybe not full-time camping, if we could even have like the off-season months where we could offer that, because there will be people who would like to do full-time camping and pay a monthly rate where we may have no campers. But I don't know, I just think being closed off to full-time sites maybe isn't the right thing in the off-season.
We would definitely have to go back and reevaluate the cost of the service.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't want to be subsidizing.
No,
What are becoming residents.
and we wouldn't want to.
So we'd have to definitely evaluate what those costs are.
In the last term, we were increasing them. I think it was $550 and we had increased it to $750 a month. So I mean, people were expecting to pay more and they're happy to pay it. So anyway, that's my
Councillor
thoughts.
Baxter.
These rates kind of seem more off-season rates than high season rates. So like in 2026, I would like to see what our off-season rate would be and what our high season rate would be, because we're gonna use 2025 as seeing how many people want to come back to Merritt, how many people want to rent.
So
We need
the
some
problem,
data.
the problem with having a lower off-season rate is that they still use water, they still use power, it still costs the same.
This could be the cost.
But I don't think we don't have an on and off season rate because the cost is still the same to us. And again, should we be
If you wanna make
subsidized?
some money.
But should you be subsidizing?
We're not talking about subsidizing,
you-
we're talking about charging more.
In the,
In high season.
in the high season? I mean, sure, but I think, yeah, I agree in 2026, let's see where we're at. I know that we're gonna lose, 10 to 12 trailer sites.
Right.
So. And I don't know that the
Charging
dike,
more.
I don't know that the dike is gonna be super attractive.
Councilor Petrosi?
Well, since COVID, things have changed. There's more people living in their RVs. And I don't think we want to be long-term at Clay Banks. We want to, 1 week, 2 week. Yeah. Things have changed. There's more people living in their RVs year round and yeah, I just don't know about some of them
Essentially, we
staying
become
here.
landlords.
Okay, yeah, so.
Well, not only that, but come wintertime, then we've got to start plowing. Anyways, Councilor Charney?
I think we have to be careful if we start talking off-season, because I don't think we really want to have full-timers there in the winter, because now we have to make sure the water is insulated or whatever, so that it just creates a lot of problems when you have full-timers. And I go back to the word municipal. We don't usually have full-timers in the winter in a municipal park. I know we did, I know, but I'm looking around the province where I've gone to a lot of municipal parks. And they shut down Thanksgiving. That's it. They're finished. And you do have to have special considerations for water, even your electrical during the winter. So that's one consideration that we have to think.
Councilor Regan?
I was just thinking that for my house renovation, I was gonna rent a motorhome and go and stay at Claybanks if it was open. For 2 months.
Lots of people there are lots of people.
That are rebuilding their homes still because of the flood.
But then you have to have electrical meters if you're there full time, most people have electrical meters so that they can check the consumption. Because in the wintertime, believe me, an RV is the last place you want to be, is up here in an RV. It's nothing but a sieve. So the electrical bill would go. And if we as a community are paying for that, it's going to cost more to pay the electrical than have them staying there. So there's a
Well, that's
lot of
what-
considerations for the winter.
Yeah.
No mic. No mic.
We do also have mobile home parks where people can park their RV, rent the pad. So that we, again, making those decisions around how much we compete with local business. I just put that out there because we don't want to be seen as taking business from our local business owners. Or not so local.
Mr. Richard?
I don't think we have to be concerned with taking the spaces in the mobile home park, because Diamondville had the 31 empty spaces where we put the temporary housing. Because they were quite empty. And in El Dorado, they had a couple spaces like what you suggested, and anybody who's staying in an RV in the wintertime is going to have it skirted and insulated, because they're not insane. The cost of heating a unit in the winter is crazy, and they're filling up propane tanks, so anybody with a brain is insulating their unit if they're camping all year, and I've known people that have done that, so I mean. Yes, I agree,
Being in an RV in the winter here.
I have actually, and I have been.
Awful.
Yeah, it is, agreed, I agree. But if people were gonna do that, they would pay rent and they would spend a fortune on heating and their gas propane tank. Cause it is expensive and they would have it skirted. It's not the ideal, it's just giving people options. And then we would charge a rent according. So if you were thinking of renting a pad at, 800, you'd charge 1,000 because of the high cost of the electricity, but. It's just an idea, it's a revenue source that wouldn't be impossible.
Councilor Rogan?
Yep. In my opinion, I think that if we choose some of the spots to offer the monthly rentals we would avoid that concern of losing some revenue. And again, I will have to review what, because we offered that service before. Now, at that time, what was the revenue versus what's going to be the revenue if we don't offer that service? And just to answer the question, so Powell River, Logan Lake, and Mackenzie are offering monthly rents for the municipal campgrounds.
So we can, does council want to see how our season goes? And then
No, of
again, we
course.
can amend this partway through, right? We can bring an amendment forward and say, we
Talk
have a
about it.
lot of requests for this.
I would also like to see how many long-term rentals they had prior to the flood.
I will ask the director if he can find
But
that.
you got to remember the long-term rentals were because we were costing out to somebody who was running the place.
Mhm.
So that was money going in their pocket, not the city's. So that has to be taken into consideration. We got to decide out if we're going to put a caretaker in there, if the city's going to take it over,
Mhm.
and that'll change things. Because I remember going there several times, and there was people that already had their plywood skirts up already, so they're now there for the rest of the year. That's not fair to the traveling public, and I think we've
I
got
just want to know how many there were. I don't.
a lot.
We can see if we can find that data, for sure.
Councillor Baxter.
I really think the city should take this over.
Yeah.
This could help with the water treatment plant reserves. We could put this money into the water treatment plant and maybe afford something without costing the taxpayers in the future.
And again, we'll bring you all of those options in a report in the early part of the new year.
Moving on.
Community services fees, not a whole lot of change here either. Everything is pretty much 5%. You'll see I've tried to align family rates at different facilities, is one of, in regards to public skating and NBA Aquatic Center. Most of our public skates are sponsored, so we don't actually collect a lot of revenue there from public. Field use is the big change, and we discussed that a bit in the budget. With those additional fees, so previously youth did not pay fees, adults paid a very small amount. They paid was it like $200 per team to use all of the fields all of the time. It was a very small amount. So I think in 2024, we kept the fees the same at while we went out to the develop the advisory committee because of a lot of feedback from the field users in particular. And our revenue for the whole year in the fields was $9,600, which was a 1.7% or some very small amount of cost recovery for the cost of parks and field maintenance. The amount that they have recommended for the fields is relatively small. It does not going to make much more revenue than that. We're still going to only be overall generating about a 16% cost recovery on recreation. That means that 84% of operating costs come from our general tax revenue. This is not unusual. You've heard me say, Kamloops is shooting for 50%. They're thinking they're going to cost themselves out. Lower income families will not be able to access those facilities. They'll mostly cost kids and seniors out of using different facilities or joining clubs. If the cost of ice for a youth group, which we charge 70, where am I? Should really get some glasses on. So the ice rental for youth rate, we're recommending 78, 75 in 2025. That I pay for my kids' hockey $450 a year, plus fundraising, plus tournament fees, plus plus, right? So you get to a point where you're gonna cost families out of some of these things if you go too high. So ideally, we would cost recover about 30%. That's still pretty challenging for most communities to try and find that tipping point of accessible to most people versus only accessible to the people in the higher income bracket. Some communities have access passes, so they do an assessment based on someone's tax return, is they are going to get a subsidized pass. There is an administrative cost to that. That might not be of value to a community our size, but in a city, there is a value to that. YMCA's do it. Many communities have these access passes, but for a community our size, we're probably better off just trying to keep people using our facilities at a rate, much like transit, except that it costs us some money to run our facilities, and that for the good of the community, we all contribute to that.
Councillor Baxter.
You said yesterday that we will be tracking Central Park to have data on how much is used in the city maintenance done on the park. That data will help us next year's budget.
Yeah, so what we're trying to show is for user groups, and again, the argument was that there should be really no fee for the use of fields because there's very little cost to them, which is not true, because it costs a lot to maintain a field, costs lots to cut grass, there's staff time, there's equipment, fencing needs to be repaired, dugouts need to be repaired. So there's a lot of work that goes into maintaining our fields, but we don't do each individual park separately, right? It's just the cost of maintaining parks and fields. So we're going to try and keep Central Park for the year at least, to show what the actual cost is of maintaining the soccer fields, the ball diamonds, onto themselves, so that they get a better sense of what it actually costs us. When we're talking about this, it's the burden for recreation is covered by the arena ultimately.
Councillor Charney.
I would like to see these fees stay the way they are without big increases. I mean, we all know that recreation is really important for developing minds, keeping people physically fit, et cetera. And I think if we start raising them really high, we are going to, as you say, people can't afford it. And we need people out in our fields playing ball, playing soccer, running around, whatever.
And
So-
that's why we have the recreation users group that
Yeah.
will be monitoring all of this.
Yeah.
Because they're the people who have kids in it and
Our coaching and
coaching and
Yeah.
they that's something that will continue right through to the end of this term, is they will meet every year or 4 times a year, just like everything else. And they have their finger on the pulse. So
That's great, because that's one thing that we can offer
The u-
is reasonable
the
recreation
the
fees.
users will move this up as they have to. They now understand, they went through the whole process and it was painful, but they now see what it costs to run.
I
the
just throw at
fields.
things like $60 million for a wastewater treatment plant, and people go, oh my God. But I think the biggest thing is that we want to try and make sure that the arena users are not carrying the largest burden, or disproportionately carrying the burden, right? Like, there is more cost to running an arena than there is to ball diamonds, but there is still a cost to ball diamonds and soccer pitches and tracks and things like that. So just trying to make sure that the balance is even versus one type of user group carrying a disproportionate amount of the user burden.
Councillor Richard.
I was just wondering, is the central sports box, the park sports box, is it locked when people aren't using it? Because
You can jump over it.
that's what I thought. So, because I'm wondering if people go to rent it so that they can use it,
Mhm.
and then there's other people in there, like how is that monitored? Like how,
We would have staff go out to make sure that we don't get a lot of rentals for the sport.
but even, okay, because I'm just wondering, like, how well is that received by people, and are there problems there?
Well, it's the same thing with the diamonds, right? You can get onto a diamond. So if somebody's using a diamond and a rental group comes in,
Yeah.
there's the same level of conflict, right? We don't have staff that go out and sit at the diamonds all day
No,
or all evening. So
Are there
it's
any-
the same thing, right?
and are there problems for residents when they?
Think we've had any conflicts.
The sports box usually has the nets, the basketballs. It's open to be used.
which is great.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking if you
I don't
look
think
at-
there's been anybody other than the roller skating guy who's decided he wanted to use it. I think it's just been open to be used.
Yeah.
So then
we
if they
have-
can use it for free, why would they want to pay for it and rent it?
Well, if you want to use it for roller skating, you're going to be paying
So
for it.
let's say somebody wanted to have box lacrosse,
Okay.
right? And they wanted to have an hour where they could develop a box lacrosse team in the community, and they just want those people in there, then they would rent it exclusively to use it. Otherwise, they have to share it.
Okay.
So if they want exclusive use, they would rent it, just like any of the other facilities. We don't get a lot of requests for that, other than the roller skating guy, right?
Or maybe you just want a flat space to do something for 2 hours or something like that.
Well, you share it.
Yeah.
I've been in there where there's been basketball, kids on the other end playing roller hockey, and then us in the middle with the remote control cars chasing them all around. So
Yeah, no, I mean,
Don't-
it's good. I'm just
don't-
curious because I didn't know how well it was.
yeah, it gets used a lot.
Yeah. No, you see people in there, but you kind of
It's not a
wonder
revenue generator.
No.
if people actually pay for it. Because
Councilor
that was quite a cost.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if the non-local user fee of 25% more is enough.
There wasn't one until this group sat down, and that's what they felt
25% there.
would be
So
fair.
the rec committee.
Yeah,
decides,
they
okay.
felt that this, we didn't have that because traditionally we are seeing people coming and
Yeah.
holding their tournaments here
Yeah.
because we're cheaper. So that's why they felt 25%. But then their user groups, they'll try it this year and see what it looks like next year.
And I mean, just to be clear, 25%, it's basically 25% of like $2.
But
So you're right, it could be more.
Bucks.
I mean, for youth, right? What is it?
Well, no, there's adult.
Yeah, so
alternatives
the
things
youth
too, right?
sports costs during the weekend is $2.75 per field per hour. So 25% of that is not a whole heck of a lot.
yeah, but when
So
you're talking youth, that's the whole idea. So youth do not have to pay.
But if you're bringing in other tournaments,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if BC softball is bringing in a tournament and they're getting revenue from that tournament in some way. So these are the recommendations of the committee. The committee has no authority to set the fees. They are the recommendations. So if council does not agree with the recommendation, they can certainly make any changes they want to. This is just what they felt like their group could handle.
So I do agree when we do have something like when we had the BC boys or the BC Bantam softball here, or yourself,
Or something, yeah.
we had them here for 3 days, but that meant that was hotels for 3 days, restaurants for 3 days, gas stations for 3 days.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off.
Really hotels, they.
Oh, lots of hotels.
Yes, lots of hotels.
Lots of
Parked in,
hotels.
they camped in the park.
That was overflow. So I'm just saying, you got to take that into consideration too. They are staying here for 3 days.
Mhm.
So,
But again, if you've got an adult tournament, and it's being sponsored by.
Yep.
So again, you can set the rates as you see fit. You can say 25% for youth groups, out of town youth groups. You could say something different for adult groups. It's totally up to council.
and the group felt that this year at 25% would be looked at the end of the year, just to see if it was worth it. And if not, it would go up again. So. Councilor Egan, you done?
Yeah, sorry.
Councilor Attorney?
One facility I don't see down here is the track. I know the school uses it. I don't know if we still have an agreement with the school. If we do, it's a very one-sided agreement where they use our facility and the city cannot use their facilities. So I think that has to be looked at. And so someone decides to hold a track meet here. Are they going to get that facility free, or are we going to charge them the same as other fields?
So we would ultimately charge them as the other fields, right? I mean, we're unlikely because we're not a property surface track to have a lot of outside track meets coming in.
Yes.
But you are 100% correct that the joint use agreement between the school board and the city, which has never actually been signed, is not supportive of the city's use of facilities. And it really impacts revenue. So Mr. Zackel's been working for several months on trying to get this updated. I don't know if we've had any success. Yeah, so Mr. Zackel will just come up and give you a quick brief on that.
Thank you, Your Worship, councillors. I've submitted it a few months back to the school district and have not received any confirmation back. We are in the process of working some agreement out. Just so you are aware, a bunch of our youth groups, soccer especially, use the school fields at no charge. So there is a lot of one-offs that we do for each other. But yeah, agreement would be beneficial to both, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yes, because I know during the spring, the classes come down to the track all the time.
Mhm.
And you know, they're using the track, et cetera. And after school, they have their track team down there. So just wondering.
Mhm.
But I think it should be maybe written in here, down as one of our facilities. Just make it a little more official.
Thank you, Mr. Zeckel. Any other questions? Moving on.
Civic Center, I know council had some concerns about Civic Center. We haven't really done a lot of adjustments here. Mr. Zackel pointed out that I was not charging more for the entire facility than I was for the full auditorium. So we've adjusted that. As well as some minor adjustments on what the definitions are of full day versus per hour and things like that. Clarifying room 1, which is the tiny room, as being at a lesser rate. Our general fee for, let's say, room 1 or room 2, 3, 4 is slightly higher than a local business that offers a boardroom. So we feel like that's fairly appropriate. Again, for commercial uses, things are higher than for just general use, right? Like if a business comes in and wants to use one of our facilities, one of our rooms, we're going to charge them more than we would if somebody was hosting a family pancake breakfast, right? At last year's fees, we didn't see a significant change in use or a significant change in revenue. So most of the fees have just gone up that 5% that we premised in the last rates and fees.
Councilor Oaken.
So that was my question. So what was the occupancy rate for November and let's say October and November this year? Do we know that?
Sorry, level of use?
Yes, the occupancy rate,
Oh, every day.
like it was booked solid.
I don't think I would say booked solid, but there's events like there are extra vehicles in the parking lot outside the Civic Center almost every day.
I'm asking because I feel that this is the only facility that we have in town that can, host certain number of people, in the facility. I have heard concerns from different organizations that they have to go outside in Merritt to be able to have an event. And when we compare those fees, like a recent event from the Chamber of Commerce that they paid $350 at Lower Nicola, compared to what they would have paid here, that is a huge impact for this organization. So I want to make sure that we are not losing revenue, that it's still, it is still being occupied, and also that is still affordable for these organizations.
So I think, instead of having a not-for-profit rate, what we're doing is asking those not-for-profit groups to come to us and talk about what their needs are and how we can support their needs, right? Some not-for-profits have more money than others. And so we're trying to meet the needs of those groups. When we're doing commercial or for-profit, like there's a reason that's higher. When we're doing general, like if you think about, you rent the Civic Center, the whole Civic Center for your wedding at $1,500 a day. It's a pretty good, I mean, if you're renting a lot of different, halls, it's a lot more expensive. Church halls might be less, but they would have a smaller capacity typically. If you're renting a big facility like the Civic Center and you're taking it up for 3 days, because you have your setup day, you have your reception day, you have your takedown day, that means nobody else is using the facility. Yep, it's the full facility. So nobody else is using the facility for those days. We're canceling programming. We're putting the residents out for an event for a specific person or family or whatever, right? So again, when we're talking about cost recovery, we look at who are we cost recovering from? We're cost recovering from special instances, right? One-offs, people who are using it for their benefit, not the benefit of the community.
Counselor Richard.
So when we have the general and then the for-profit, what would be examples of like the for-profit groups that you would charge the 2,000 a day versus the 1,500?
Well, we had that group that came down that wanted you to invest.
Oh,
Find
and
four
Hark.
people, invest those 4 people. So they rented and that would be a profit.
Mhm.
Yeah, we
Okay.
got suckered into that thing.
Oh, okay. It was
So,
something
yeah,
else.
I mean, that kind of stuff, like, there's a gentleman who wants to put on a PVC convention here. That would be,
For
for
profit, because I guess what I'm thinking about is the smaller groups like Country Christmas or the Chamber. You really want to see events like that happen
But
here.
those are not for-profit groups.
No,
But
those would be.
But also too, Country Christmas came to us and we said, sure. We'll take care of that and we'll
Good.
take care of it to come, right?
And it would just really be nice to see the Chamber host their event at the Civic Center next year because there was a lot of people from town. Like, it would be great. Because Laura Nicola it was good. It was just very
Different.
cozy.
All we gotta do is ask.
So, and I think what we have to think about is council has, they have their grants in kind, you have some contingency, but there also has to be a bit of flexibility at my level to be able to say, we're partnering with this group, right? We're partnering with Country Christmas.
Yes.
We're a partner,
Of course.
right? We're a partner with this thing. And, or this group particular, we can give them a certain amount of administrative leeway for some in-kind, recognizing that we're not just saying we're cutting everything, but we're looking at, okay, what is our revenue versus the benefit to the whole community versus the benefit to 1 or 2 individuals or a family or something like that, right? Like, so let's say the interior community services, is that the correct? When they come swimming or they're using the civic center for something, that's a group where we would say, okay, that's a huge benefit to a significant portion of the population, right? It's the people who access the services. It's a benefit to their families. It's a benefit, to a number of people in the community. We ultimately would like to be able to say, okay, yeah, we'll do this versus this cost. And recognizing that we're looking for like, hey, here's a community benefit. Let's see what we can do for this group and partner with them as a contributor to their organization.
Counselor Egan.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about Silga. Are we charging them or do we do that as an in-kind?
Well, we don't not charge soda.
Well, that's taken.
Counselor Charney.
Could I clarify? Did you say we don't charge Silga?
No, we charge soda.
We charge
Great.
Silga.
Okay. Okay, I just want a little clarification on a sentence here. I'm just quite a little confused on it. I don't know why I am, but I am. So it's just above composting under the community services.
Mhm.
Council should also consider the rates that local businesses offer for similar facilities and price our facilities to minimize competition with the private sector.
So if there was perhaps a hotel that's going to build a conference center and they're going to rent it out for weddings, right? Again, as the municipal government, do we want to take business away from a local business? Right? So if we undercut a local business, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't necessarily want people to use our civic center for something that they could go to a local business for. So it'd be like saying, okay, we're going to charge half the cost for an excavator as construction company A, because we want to generate revenue by renting out that excavator. That's not really the role of.
But we don't go around and check everybody's rates, do we?
Oh, we
Before we
do.
set ours?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's how, so what you're saying is, we go to certain facilities, they rent, their facility for X number of dollars. So we're going to be comparable, or we're going to be less, or we're going to be
We want to
more?
be a little bit more
A little bit more.
because we don't want to take their business, right? Like if the Legion, for instance, is renting their spaces for less than us, great, because we want the Legion to have that revenue, because they don't have any other revenue sources other than membership. And nationally, Legion's memberships are going down,
Okay.
right? So that's what kind of what we're looking at is like, how do we compare?
Counselor Hogan.
Thank you. So going back to the civic center rentals. So when you mentioned here to the 2024, 1,500, 2025, 2,000. So we are considering a 35% increase for 2025, correct?
Yeah, just for that particular facility, because I think if you see where I've got full auditorium,
Yeah.
I rated them the same and I shouldn't have.
So I just want to make sure that the information provided to me by a concerned citizen, it's accurate. So I was told that the quote that the Chamber of Commerce received to host the event in the Civic Center was 3,500. Is that correct?
So they would have been, yeah,
A concerned citizen?
general per hour should have been, how long did they rent it for?
Just one night, one evening to.
Well, I mean, how many hours, right? Like,
Oh.
so it, up to 8 hours for general, for just renting the auditorium would have been like just under $1,000.
And then you get.
They needed the kitchen?
Yeah.
Okay, so, that was $110 per hour. So I'm not sure how that, that's for commercial. That's commercial, right? So, it would have been $550.
So,
Does seem very high.
Counselor Hogan, did the concerned citizen get a written quote?
Now I'm wondering for that, so I will be asking for that.
And so we need
Produce the
to,
quote and we'll see what it is.
yeah, and we need to know that because if our staff are misunderstanding what is commercial versus what is general, what is,
Okay.
yeah,
Sounds good.
we can
Thank you.
do some education there.
Counselor Richard.
Just adding on to his question, so based on this list, because you have the whole facility for the whole day, if they would have said one to come set up at 3 o'clock and then have the event over by 11, would that you consider that the full day and then?
That would have been, yeah, that would
The
have been like
1,500?
1,000, yeah. That would have been
For the
like-
full.
if they wanted the whole facility, which.
But they don't
probably
need the
want.
rooms, but I mean.
Yeah, so
like,
they
would
would have
you just
been
charge them that and cap it out?
1,500.
Cause that's what I had heard as well, and I thought, holy cow, like, it's kind of embarrassing to, especially because it was Darcy that was the host there, and he was like pointing out that we were all there, and I was like, oh yeah, we're all here. I think he was trying to embarrass us, which he was good at, about it, you know.
It's a little bit inappropriate in a public setting
Yeah.
for another organization to try and embarrass the city, especially an organization we support. But hey, who am I to say?
Well, I think it was giving us a bad time for not coming up and saying hi, but you could, we were so tight in your
Yeah.
seat, you couldn't
So
get
we'll
up.
make sure the staff understand how this is meant to work. And again, they haven't seen, like, the staff hasn't seen updates for the Civic Center since 2007.
Okay,
And there was a lot of really weird things.
and this is just in general, it would be nice to make sure that for people like the chamber or whoever, that it's something affordable country Christmas, you want to see everything happening.
Yeah, theirs are not commercial or for profit.
Exactly.
So,
So I mean, they want to have the kitchen because obviously there's a misunderstanding because 3,500, obviously they can't afford to have it at those rates. So
Yeah.
I really hope that the chamber has it again next year, the Civic Center, because it was great and they could have more people. So
That's very good.
Yeah, the only other thing that I think maybe the staff is being confused by is that when you say general and for profit, a lot of these groups they're not for profit, but they are using these events to raise money.
that's
So
still,
that's
yeah. And maybe but I mean, that still doesn't make it a for-profit event. It means it's a
but maybe your
fundraiser.
staff just doesn't
Yeah, and we
understand.
can work on that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And they should have seen these rates because we approved them last year. And they should, if they had any questions, I always say the only foolish question is the one not asked. So if you're not clear on how to sell something, then don't open your mouth.
Yeah, so we'll make sure they're clear. I apologize if it was misunderstood, and we'll make sure that's not the case this year.
So since we're on number one and it's been 2 hours, let's take 5 minutes here and take a bit of a break, please. So
Super important one.
what's that? I know, but I don't want to be here till midnight. We're back. Oh, there we go. And we're back. Moving on. How exciting. I'm sorry.
Thanks. Compost facility. So again, just some increases in those compost costs that are again, cost recovery. We sell, most of it's being sold in bulk to a local business. Biggest change is the loading fee. We weren't charging a loading fee previously, and our staff there are doing a lot of the loading. And so there's wear and tear on the equipment that needs to be considered. So we've just put in a per yard fee there. And I've made some changes to the discount because we don't have to discount it, but we can. So not much change there. People take our compost. Animal control licenses, fees and charges. No change for neutered or spayed dog license fee. Increases on the intact dog license fee. Increases on aggressive and dangerous dog license fees because again, this is a very expensive service that we provide to very few people. Right? And it's not a service we have to provide. So you'll see the biggest changes here are around impoundment fees. Because the taxpayers shouldn't necessarily be paying for the actions of few individuals. And we have no reserve or funds to do any improvements in our pound, on our like shelter building. And the cost of actually dealing with aggressive and dangerous dogs is quite high. The CO does a great deal of work with our legal counsel. We have contracts that have to be signed by people if they're going to get those dogs back. Bylaw spends a great deal of time dealing with it. We have public works staff that are feeding and sometimes being able to get the dogs out to go to the bathroom outside of their pens. So there's a lot of staff time that goes into this plus legal fees. And again, for aggressive and dangerous dogs, that's not to the benefit of the community. That's the benefit of a few individuals who are maybe not making good choices for the community.
Right. Councilor Baxter.
Could we double the aggressive dog license fee and the dangerous dog license fee?
I think I did double it.
Double it again.
Well, the issue is then they're just not going to,
dangerous.
I mean, they're not going to license them, right?
Okay.
And most of the aggressive and dangerous dogs aren't licensed. We don't make a lot of money on license fees. It's these impoundment fees that are the big
Okay.
deal.
With the impoundment fees, could we charge them like after the second impoundment, like just tell them if your dog gets impounded again, you're gonna pay for the staff's time and food that your dog may use from that point down, especially the dangerous dog, like they're gonna be fully suited up. So you're gonna have an employee fully suit up to go and deal with this dog. That's a lot of time and effort that they're clearly not paying for.
Well,
By
I think
fully
to a
suited up,
certain,
you mean what exactly?
I think to a certain degree, the aggressive dog is not the problem. It's the owner of the aggressive dog. That's where the problem comes in because that's where the bylaw officers get threatened. One instance, we had to hide a dog for about 8 hours because somebody was coming after it.
We actually have to move it out of town.
Yes. So, and let's be honest here, people that have aggressive dogs aren't going to pay you 1 cent to get it out of the thing. You can quadruple it. You're not going to see a penny. They don't have the money in the first place. That's why their dogs do what they do.
And so we don't want to make it completely out of the realm of being able to get these dogs out of because what we do is there's contracts and there's, the dog can't be in the community, or the dog, if it's in the community, must be attached to a responsible human and must be muzzled. And that's the legal part. But if we have a dog that we've seized and impounded, we actually have a process of having to get an order to have the dog disposed of. Right. So again, there's a legal process that we have to engage a lawyer and the courts in order to move forward with that animal. So there's also, these are just the impoundment fees. There's also the fines, which are not covered in this. That will be in a different bylaw. That'll be in our new fines bylaw, ticketing bylaw. CO, this is your department. Anything else? So these impoundment fees, I forgot to write down, are these per day? No, okay, per occurrence, okay.
Councilor Petrosi.
I guess there was concern 3, 4, 5 days ago about aggressive dogs on the river trail. And what would be the procedure? Just so the public can kind of know the procedure when it comes to, because it seemed like nobody knew, like, who should we call and,
They call me.
right? So, but they should call bylaw, but, you know, the procedure, you know, does he get on it right away? Like, I guess the public really don't know how it, you know.
Well, I mean, if he's not engaged in another activity, then he would go and deal with it. So if he's dealing with another high risk situation, like, you know, dealing with an unsightly property where somebody has threatened him with a sledgehammer, for instance, you know, it's really about priority. So yes, aggressive dogs are fairly high priority. Just because he goes doesn't mean it's going to be a positive outcome. He may never see those dogs.
It's an equity attack.
Yeah.
It's, the public seem to think they're gonna get the dog.
Magically going to find those dogs, right? But
Seal?
Dogs can be quite difficult to catch when there's only one individual that's available to actually do the catching, and sometimes the information about where the dogs currently are located is not readily available because dogs tend to move when they're off leash at their own pace.
looking for food.
In their own direction. So it can be sometimes quite difficult to locate the vehicle or the dog, get accurate information on which dog it is that is involved in a certain incident. But we do regular investigations. If there is a dog bite, we certainly follow up with interviews with witnesses, get statements, and do serious investigations into situations such as this. We do take it very seriously when there are dogs at large that are aggressive or dangerous.
Counselor Charney?
Where in the bylaws do we say how many dogs a residence may have?
So
We
that's-
don't list that in this bylaw. We would do that in our animal control bylaw.
Do we
And it is-
have a number?
Yeah, it is two.
One dog,
It is
one
two.
cat.
So where on here, or where do we put it where a residence has more than two dogs? What do we do?
So they would get fined.
That's in
Um,
our MTI bylaw.
yeah.
That's in a separate bylaw.
So we have an animal control bylaw, which is currently on our to-do list, outside my office. And it's looking at, again, how we ticket, how much our fines are, that relate to these things. Again, we can seize that dog, but we can't really do a lot with it, right? We'd have to find a rescue to take it. We'd have to, like, there's a lot of challenges. So that would be a priority issue. Is that the number one priority in the community for the bylaw officer? He could ticket it. How we deal with it beyond that, I guess it depends on how problematic the dogs are, right? If there's 5 dogs outside in the yard and they're barking all night, that's a problem. If it's 3 dogs and they are rarely left outside without the owner's home and they're relatively quiet, we can ticket. But maybe we're not prioritizing it.
Discretion.
Yeah.
Counselor Baxter?
Are these fees in line with other municipalities?
Oh, God, no, I jacked him right up. Because again-
Dog license fee and all that.
Dog license, the neutered spayed dog license fee is pretty close to other communities. But everything else, like lost tag replacement is just no big deal, right? And then like disposable animals, veterinary fees, advertising animals for sale, these things are, I did also increase the cost of roundup and transportation of large animals. The bylaw officer and one of the bylaw officers in the summer had more than one call to deal with some cows on the road. So again, I'm not sure that the general public should be paying for that. It should be
The owners.
the owner's responsibility. So yeah, these fees are high because it should be punitive for the people who cannot control their animals and who are allowing their dogs to be aggressive or dangerous.
Counselor Baxter, any more? No. Counselor Charney?
We used to deal with DocuPet
Mhm,
for licensing,
mhm.
and we don't anymore. $24, how did that compare to DocuPet?
Yeah, DocuPet was not very cost effective. We weren't getting very many registrations. Some communities don't even register dogs anymore because there's no cost benefit to it, right? If you have a tag with your dog's phone number on it, the dog bylaw officer will call you and say, hey, I have your dog. Can I come drop it off? If we don't know who owns the dog, it'll go to the shelter and it'll have to be paid for to get out.
Okay, so, how much do we generate from license fees?
Couple of $1,000. Less than 10,000, yeah.
Okay, and you're saying a lot of communities don't license them anymore? Is it?
Administratively, like the cost of getting, we actually got a better deal on our tags this year, but we get like this many tags and we give out like this many tags, right?
Well, can we look at the cost of everything and then how much we generate and maybe we don't license them anymore? I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that.
Yeah. It is one of the things that's on my project list. Yeah, and that's one of the things that the bylaw officer and I specifically spoke about this year, or maybe it was somebody in the front desk, is that like the idea is it beneficial to process licenses, to buy tags when we generate very little revenue from it? It's probably not cost recovery, but
Okay.
we'll explore
I
further.
think we should look into it.
Seal?
Yes, yeah.
What we did find with DocuPet was that there was a steep decline in registrations because there was no education or follow-up from DocuPet. Prior to that, one of the bylaw officers did make a concerted effort to actually go out in the community, educate residents who had dogs when they were in dog parks and out walking, and was able to get dogs registered right on the spot at that point in time. This summer, we were making a concerted effort to have, we had the two bylaw officers. One of their tasks was to go out and talk to residents who own dogs, to get dogs and educate people on dog licensing to increase the revenue there and to increase the awareness of the responsibility of dog ownership.
Yeah, so anything here that you are unhappy about? I love that. Is this, no, it's a lot. It's a lot. Sorry. Administrative charges and fees, the biggest change is a little bit more for photocopying because our photocopying costs went up dramatically over the last couple of years, especially color. We no longer photocopy in color within the organization unless it has to be in color, so like mapping and things like that. But generally all of our computers are set to print in black and white because we can't afford to keep doing this. So we have to cost recover on this. So that's the biggest changes. Same thing with which one was it? Oh, in the RCMP section, like fingerprinting and police record checks, more than a 5% cost increase there because again, those are time extensive, like what am I, it's very late. They cost time. Labor intensive. That's what I was gonna say. Labor intensive to get those things done. So more than a 5% increase in the RCMP administrative fees for things like fingerprinting and criminal record checks or police information checks. Anything in those two administrative sections? In fire and rescue services, the chief has added a number of sections. We did not bring this in last year. We left it in the fire bylaw, but we're redoing our fire bylaw. So we pulled it out and put it in here and the chief's added a number of sections. And again, this is meant to be some cost recovery for people that are impacting the cost of the service that maybe this general public shouldn't have to pay for. So false alarms, people who are having fires without permits, those sorts of things.
Mr. Baxter?
Are we in line with other communities that are charging this?
Yeah, there are some fees that like in other agreements that we kind of are following, but based on, like, you'll see the memorandum of agreement for interagency operational procedures and reimbursement rates. So the chief, this is what the chief has indicated is appropriate. There's no concerns there. Sorry.
Counselor.
So let's talk about the small confined fire permits because they went up for 100%, right? So it was $25, now it's 50.
It was 50 to get your initial one and then 25 to
Renew it, yeah.
renew it. And based on the work that has to be done, so there's administrative work here at City Hall. Somebody has to go out and inspect the site from the fire department
Yeah.
for the first one. So the costs have gone up because it's actually, we're not cost recovering on that previously.
50%.
It was definitely way lower than cost recovery previously.
That's true.
Are there a lot of people that get their small confined fire permit?
I think so. Yeah, so
Okay.
it's about $3,000 in revenue, so it's, yeah. So new section, Schedule Q, other bylaw enforcement fees. We are spending a lot of staff time, a lot of legal fees on dealing with unsightly properties and vehicles that are parked or abandoned on public property and roadways. We have absentee property owners who are using us as a landscaping service or as security for boarding up buildings that are abandoned and being broken into. The chief not long ago got a phone call from a property owner asking if the fire department can go back and board up the building again. Seems relatively inappropriate. So again, taking up the work that our staff are doing to do something that is well outside their scope, we need to cost recovery on. And there needs to be some incentive for these people to actually do the work and not rely on the city to do the work. We often have the same properties that our bylaw officer is dealing with for unsightly year over year over year. And so you can see, you know, first occurrence for an unsightly, it's the actual cost. So usually the contractor costs plus 25% because we've done some legal discussions, we've done photos, like the bylaw officer does a whole investigation and collects evidence. Right? And so it's not a couple of hours, it's a significant amount of time. And same thing with disposing of vehicles. Right? Right now we're disposing, we have 3 different sites where we have to manage some cleanup of structures that are on public land or roadways. So there's a couple of vehicle, or there's like a trailer, there's an RV, and there's a
Boat.
boat. Thank you.
Boat on a trailer.
Boat on a trailer. So those have to be disposed of. Now, those are harder for us to collect on, like ultimately we may not collect on that, but if we have it towed and the tow company gets a call from the owner and says, oh, my vehicle's there, I want to come and get it. The cost is the tow plus 25% admin fee for us if they want it back. With the unsightlies, again, if they don't make those payments, they go to property tax. So this is an opportunity for us to cost recover on some pretty significant time consuming activities that we do.
Counselor Beck.
With each occurrence afterwards, like the third one, it says plus 75%. Could we not go 25% on each one after that? Because I know there's some properties that are on, like on their 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and try. Because they just keep letting it go. But if they keep getting dinged another 25% each time, they might eventually be like, hey, look, I want to sell this property off. And then maybe somebody else can develop it into something that's not an eyesore.
Yeah, I mean, when you're getting to a $15,000, well, I'm just thinking about one property where we had to do the concrete removal. That was almost $30,000. So 75% of that $30,000, like, that's a lot. So yes, do you want to? I don't know, like that's again a choice of council. It could be plus an additional 25% after every. It could be, it's nothing to say it can't. There's no firm rules here.
I would say leave it as it is for now. Sure.
What is the tolerance level between first and second and second and subsequent? I just want to know, Where do you decide we're going back again?
We're not. Oh, sorry. We're going back to clean it up again, or we're going back to first occurrence?
We're going back to clean it up again, second time.
Then it's
What is-
whatever, once it's no longer in compliance with the good neighbor bylaw.
And how long does that take?
Depends on who owns the property,
Okay.
right? If it's just grass versus if it's like accumulation of stuff, that's different, right? Grass might only be once a year.
Okay.
But accumulation of stuff could be like within weeks. So if council's okay with that. So we were just having some discussions and what we think, because you've given us some direction, particularly around water and sewer, which is the big change. I think there was a couple of, oh, and doubling all the fees for residents in the cemetery or for non-residents in the cemetery.
And the airport fire fighting costs.
That's not gonna go in this bylaw.
Oh, okay.
That's gonna be contract. We'll
Okay.
discuss that as a contract. That our recommendation is that you approve it with the changes. And we'll just do first and second reading tonight, and then we'll do third reading and adoption next week.
So we've already got, I've already got two movers for the first.
Okay, sorry, I'm lying to you. We're gonna do all three readings tonight.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with, we're not gonna, yeah, and then we'll do adoption next week.
So am I saying to be amended
Mm-hmm.
at the end of this? No? Thank you. To be
As no, with the changes,
With
because
the-
it's, because
with-
we're not,
With changes.
it's with the changes.
Yeah. So I've already got a mover and a seconder for the first, the mover and seconder on the first one 2 hours ago. Can you remember who you were?
You did.
Yeah, yeah.
Baxter and Hogan.
So,
2 hours ago.
yeah, so you're okay with that?
Okay, hang on,
Uh-huh.
sorry, I'm gonna do this for you. Because it's gonna be complicated, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
The CO has given me some direction about doing it. That you adopt it as amended with changes being the water and sewer rates increases will be spread over 3 years instead of 2. The adding 1 free turn on and turn off. And the cemetery, grave purchase or the plot spaces, columbarium niches and burial fees will be doubled from the current recommendation for
Yes,
non-residents.
let's get that part in.
Yeah, for non-residents. I think those were the only. Yeah, those were the only ones.
I'm never dying.
Oh. I don't think we were gonna change those. Okay, and that we were gonna add track to the Parks and Fields fees and charges schedule.
Excellent.
So so now if you're first and second
Sure.
or
First and
that.
second are okay with that? All those in favor? Opposed? Recommendation that council read City of Merritt fees and charges bylaw number 2386-2024 with all of that extended stuff.
Those noted amendments.
Those noted amendments. A second time. Counselor Charney, Counselor Baxter. All those in favor? Opposed? Recommendation that that council read City of Merritt fees and charges bylaw number 2386-2024 for a third time with changes. Counselor Etchart, Counselor Egan. What time is it? Where am I? All those in favor? Opposed? Holy smokes, we got one thing done. Yoo-hoo! 7.2, City of Merritt Good Neighbor Bylaw number 2387-2024. So I'm going to read the recommendation. Recommendation that council read the City of Merritt Good Neighbor Bylaw 2387-2024 a first time. Councilor Petrosi, Councilor Baxter. Questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Recommendation that council read the City of Merritt Good Neighbor bylaw 2387-2024 a second time. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Baxter. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Carried. Recommendation that council read the City of Merritt Good Neighbor bylaw 2387-2024 a third time. Councillor Egan, Councillor Charney, any questions on that one? There's a question. Councillor Etchart.
I just want to clarify if we're gonna clarify the vehicles section, because when we discussed this in the committee, is one to define what would be considered an issued vehicle. If a person has an expired pickup or maybe convertible in the driveway, are we just focusing mostly on the derelict vehicles? Okay, because as we have people who are living with family longer in their single family homes maybe, or whatever the case may be, you'll find there may be seasonal vehicles that are parked for the winter, motorhome, camper, whatever, but they're in perfectly good running order. They have plates, but they might be parked for a few months because it's winter. I just want to make sure that our focus is on the vehicles that are not in good repair.
CAO.
Yeah, the Good Neighbor bylaw is about ensuring that the residential neighborhood is kept in the character of a residential neighborhood. Don't want residential neighborhoods to become storage areas for 10 RVs in a yard, right? We don't want it to become a dumping ground for every broken down car you've ever owned. So the idea is that, you know, the focus is on things that are detracting from other people's use of their property. Enjoyable use of their property. Thank you. Good word.
Councillor Etchart. Okay. I think I have a mover and seconder on that, do I not? Yes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 7.3 City of Merritt Parks Regulation Bylaw number 2385-2024. Recommendation that council read the City of Merritt Parks Regulation Bylaw number 2385-2024 a first time. Councillor Ogan, Councillor Petrosi, any questions on this one? Councillor Ogan.
So I wasn't sure about the changes because there was the old and the new one. So can you just go over the main changes that we are adopting tonight?
So the changes relate to overnight sheltering in the parks. As a part of the encampments that we've struggled with over the summer, we got a legal opinion about some parts of our bylaw that recommended we extend the hours based on some of the recent court cases, that we have the ability to limit the size of the shelter. And if people are staying in that area, once they've taken the shelter down, how much space they can actually take up. Because what we saw in the encampments in the summers, that some of them were getting quite large and spread out. So there is some limitations on how large your shelter can be and what the footprint of your stuff can be. And then the other big change is the location. So we have space up at the airport for people to overnight shelter rather than Nicola Park.
I think as we head to UBCM, I think we have to have some sort of query on what the provincial support on this is going to be. They cannot continue to allow communities to shoulder this entire burden. It's just unacceptable. So I think as council, we should put our heads together and Versilga maybe come up with something that, you know, kind of works out. You know, we do need some help on this. And I think just leaving it to communities is pretty unacceptable. That's my soapbox. So Councillor Baxter.
So Nicola Park will no longer be, it's the airport that is the destination.
Have a mover and seconder on that, do I already? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Recommendation that council read the City of Merritt Parks by regulation bylaw number 2385-2024 a second time. Councillor Egan, Councillor Petrosi. Questions? All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Recommendation that council read the City of Merritt Parks regulation bylaw number 2385-2024 a third time. Councillor Charney. Councillor Etchart. He's writing a memoir there. Counselor Petrosi. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. 8.1 video surveillance recording at municipal properties policy. The following policy is referred to council from December 4th, 2024, Policy Review Committee. Recommendation that council adopt the City of Merritt video surveillance and recording at municipal properties policy. Councillor Etchart, Councillor Baxter, any questions on this? Councillor Hogan.
So actually, I have three recommendations that I think that the policy is missing. The first one is I feel like the 30-day retention period may not work in some cases, especially in legal cases. Sometimes you have to have maybe the 30 days it may be too short or too long. So I think that we need to review that time. The policy does not outline how misuse by authorized personnel will be monitored or prevented. I think that we have to address that one as well. And lastly, there is no mention of how frequently the policy will be reviewed or updated to adapt the evolving privacy laws and technology. I think that we need to address these three.
Seal.
Thank you, Your Worship. In regards to the request or the inquiry about the 30-day retention period, we have done a review and 30 days is standard. If there is an incident within those 30 days, we would be aware of it well before 30 days. We would pull out the data, save the data. The 30-day retention period is kind of the cyclical piece where that's when it would start overwriting every 30 days. Generally, they're for capacity on servers, etc. And in the cloud storage, it's good to just have 30 days and then have it written over at that point. In regards to authorization for personnel to access it, we have identified the key personnel within the organization that would need access to it. There is password protections. We do apply all of our restrictions possible to make sure that data is secure, both on our servers in the clouds, as well as access. So there would be restrictions and we do need restrictions on that. So we do have that identified in the policy. For an annual review, we can certainly amend the policy to bring this back annually.
Seal.
Yeah, I mean, many of our bylaws and policies have not been reviewed adequately on a cycle, which is what we're really working on doing. The CO is kind of putting it in to a schedule. What should come back every 3 years, what should come back every 5 years. It could be that we do an internal staff review. We don't necessarily bring something back like this if we don't see that there's a change in legislation. We wouldn't necessarily bring it back to council for review, but we would do a staff review to see if there's a need to update it. Especially where we know there's a lot of emerging legislation and a lot of emerging technology issues with some of these things. Like this is one of those ones where, yeah, we're gonna have to keep an eye on it. Other ones we might only review every 3 years. We feel like this is a really important safety protocol for all of our facilities. So we appreciate council support on this.
Okay with that? Yeah. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. Notices of motion. Reports from council. Who's going? Councillor Etchart.
Well, it was definitely a busy couple of weeks for, I think, all of us. I know that we wanted to participate in the parade, but there was too much going on. I think on the 27th, there was the dance recital at noon and then at 5 o'clock. And then, yeah, I think it was the 27th. It was on the Wednesday. And then they had and then I'm missing something out. Oh, and the CNA opening of the building. So I got to go and see what the new courthouse looked like, and quite impressed with how they've developed that building and gotten it all renovated, and it has a kitchen in there for teaching and all their cultural experiences that they can put on there. So it's a beautiful building. And the 29th, of course, was our Santa parade, where I think most of us got to walk in the parade, which was great. I don't think there was any concerns or issues other than there was a few gaps in there, so maybe we don't have that next time, so people don't think it's over. I know that there was a craft fair the next day with Santa Land and everything being busy. I know personally, I was part of the Santa breakfast on Sunday with the Bass crew. We were cooking there pretty early and it was busy. It was really good turnout. It was really good on the city to have hosted that. The staff did a fabulous job having the different decorations in the extra rooms there with activities for Santa and Mrs. Claus, and I think there was even some Grinch. Yeah, Grinch and other volunteers. So it was really well received. Families loved it. So thank you for putting that on. Vanessa did a great job. And Alex, I guess. And what else was there this last week? We had a workshop last week, another craft fair on the weekend. Yesterday we had our meeting, just lots happening all the time. So
Thank you. Counselor Baxter.
On the 27th, I went and helped with the city of Merritt float, and then I went to the dance recital. And then on Thursday, the 28th, I went to the Christmas concert at the Center. And the 29th, I was in the Christmas parade with 40 pounds of candy. It was a lot of candy. And then I went to the stewing meeting on Thursday, the 5th, and then Saturday, the 7th, the Chamber of Commerce dinner.
Counselor Charney.
On the 29th, I was in the parade, and I have to say that Sean Strang's son Travis was a fantastic help. He hauled my candy for me, and then he filled my pouch up, so he was a great help. I also attended the craft fair, which I really enjoyed. December 1 was Breakfast with Santa, and Councillor Etchert was there cooking up pancakes, and it was a fantastic breakfast. Really enjoyed that. December 3, we had Urban Metrics present to us, and that was a very interesting presentation. December 4th, we had policy review where we went through all the things that you passed tonight. And then we had collective bargaining that evening and pizza in between. December 7th, craft fairs. There were 2 craft fairs, which is, I love this time of the year, get to go see what everyone can do. And then December 9th, last night, we had budget. So that's it.
So for myself, on the 27th, I did a Rotary lunch and was the keynote speaker. Enjoyed that a lot. Love to see the Rotary coming back again. Went to their dance recital. Went to the CNA, beautiful building, gigantic table they have upstairs. Christmas concert was awesome. Some fantastic talent in this community. I cannot believe it. The light up parade was amazing. We took first place as government. So thank you to the crew who decorated the ribbons upstairs if you want to go see it. Speaking of that, craft fair the next day and handed out ribbons to all the winners, and it was really nice. Great job to Carrie Ware for keeping that going, but she is requesting people to start help her out because she's an army of one now, so she needs some help. On December the 3rd, I had the closing meeting with Samaritan's Purse. They're now out of the community. I thank them for their time. We tried to get them extended, but it just didn't happen. Their budget ran out. So, but they'll always be there if we need them again. So I do want to send a personal thank you out to them all for being here through all the hard times and all the way through. They couldn't have picked 2 better people to run it with Sherry and Bobby. It was really well done. So it was kind of a sad day to say goodbye to them. Had the cow that night. I had a meeting on December 4th with the hospice group and the NVIT carpentry crew for the wind phone up at the cemetery, and they're really anxious to get that going. Matter of fact, the NVIT is considering now putting that in all of their cemeteries on their properties as well, putting the wind phone in. We had the policy review, had closed council, and then we had our first prelim budget last night. So, Councillor Egan.
Well, the first week or the last week in November, I was really not feeling very well, but I did manage to go to the noon showing of the little munchkins and the minions. They just killed me. I loved them. On the 3rd, we had the cow. We had the policy review again, like Councillor Charney said, everything that we reviewed, you all reviewed tonight. And then we had the special council meeting on the 4th. And last night with the budget, and I think we've done a lot. I'm sorry I wasn't able to go on the parade, but still getting over it.
Councilor Petrosi.
Yeah, November 29th, the parade, I was the lazy one. I rode on the float the whole time.
We noticed.
Yes, all of you ran back and forth, handing out lots of candy. I worked all day. My feet were tired, but it's the best way, right? So Saturday, November 30th, attended the craft fair at Civic Center, and I was there, two of her grandchildren sat with Santa and Mrs. Claus for photos, so I was there to watch that. And our 1-year-old grandson was very well behaved. The next day, Sunday, December 1st, I managed to slip away from Canadian Tire and get breakfast with Santa. And thanks, Adam, for the breakfast, you and your family. You always do such a good job. So thank you. Wednesday, December 4th, I made some rounds downtown, just speaking, stopped in at a few of the businesses. Stopped in at the Merritt Food Bank, and the day before, Wednesday, December 3rd, they had given out enough food to feed 283 people, and that was amazing, right? So job well done there. Stopped at Work BC and talked with a couple ladies there, and they did mention about the amount of retirees heading back into the workforce, looking for work. So quite a few. So they have noticed quite a difference. So, and later that day, I had coffee at A&W with about 15 retirees. So yeah, they seem to enjoy my company. I enjoy their company. So yeah, had a good week.
Councilor Hogan.
I would say that I will repeat a lot of the stuff that had been already said. November 27th, the dance recital. The 28th, the Christmas concert. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it. The performance was great. November 29th, the Santa's parade. Yeah, I noticed what the Councilor Petrosi said. Chamber of Commerce event, that was very good. The budget session, and I had a meeting that was with different organizations. I'm not sure if you have heard that Small Business BC filed for bankruptcy. It's a big impact, for the business community. So there are services that they are out there, as well as clients that are, like right now with a service provider. So we are trying to get involved as Community Futures to step in and provide services that they were receiving. So this is early stage, so I'm not sure how is that going to look like. But yeah, that was a bad news when we heard about this society. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, just want to point out that we had a great Christmas party at Councilor Charney's house and had a great time. So thank you very much to you and Lloyd. Great. No, you still are. That's going to take some time. It's all on tape. You're going to have to live that one down. Gas buddy. I forgot my gas buddy. Smithers today, 151.9, low 153.9 high. Grand Forks, 151.9. Penticton, 158.9. Merritt, 155.9 and 157.9. So Smithers and Grand Forks are the winners. Information items. Anybody have anything on the information items? Notice everybody's climbing on the transit bandwagon here. With that, we'll say goodnight. Thank you. Thank you.